I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That felt so good. Well, it's a full moon, Phil. Yes. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back, Bob. Thank you. Missed you. John Montgomery will not be in attendance tonight. John is traveling, so we swap out one board member and we bring in. We're going to alternate for the rest of the year. But fortunately, we have no heated votes tonight. Tonight is a work session, which is why we are sort of structured in this round table here, square table. Rectangle, maybe? No, it's definitely square. So work session means the board and our administrators are engaging in something that we're really excited to have happen tonight, which is a discussion about the priorities that our administrators have in our schools and in their various areas of responsibility. And we are also going to be talking about how our district can begin to think about and discuss publicly the performance metrics, how we define success as a district. Elena, are you okay over there? Seems like everybody is ill. How we can define success as a district, how do we do that at a building level, at a district level, and this is kind of the beginning of an ongoing dialogue, and we probably will try and do another one of these in the not too distant future. I've probably stolen some of your thunder, so I'm going to pass over what's left to Dr. Harrison to kind of add some more to that.
Yeah, if I may, can I kind of derail us for a minute in a couple little news type items?
Yes,
and we have some students that I want to acknowledge, and then we'll transition back into it. But it's nice to see some folks here tonight. Thank you for coming. We've missed you of late. And certainly, as we were saying, walking over from our executive session meeting, that it seems like we haven't had a full week of school in quite a long time, and the weather does not look too promising when we look down the road a week or so. But when we think of weather conditions like that, we often forget to thank the folks behind the scene, and I do want to acknowledge Gary Knowles and our custodians and buildings and grounds staff. When we were supposed to have that the storm to end the world going back a week and a half ago, there were a crew of people that were prepared to be here overnight and to care for the school grounds, to check on the school buildings, to make sure there weren't problems here. But we had 5 people that were here around the clock. Heading into the storm the other day as well, we had folks that were here making sure hills were salted and certain emergency routes were clear. So we need to certainly give kudos to Gary and his crew. But also I want to acknowledge my colleagues because they work so diligently in making careful plans for their schools, for their students and their teachers. And every step of the way with one of these delays or closures, there's been many shifts that have had to occur. So I want to acknowledge all of you and thank you for your efforts. And those of you that have high school parents can appreciate Dave and Deb's leadership in trying to manage the exam schedule for regents and midterms, and having to constantly reevaluate and adjust. So I want to send a great thank you to all my colleagues. Great work. Also, I just want to plug that tomorrow night, Rivertown Parents is hosting a program at Sleepy Hollow High School, 7 p.m., entitled How to Help Your Child Tackle Time Management and Transition. So it's sure to be a great program, and I would encourage you to come out and check that out tomorrow night, again, 7 p.m. at Sleepy Hollow. Also, just want to give some shout outs to some students. Of course, over the last 2 weeks, we've had some great musical performances, whether it was the Main Street concert or the 3rd graders last week. Outstanding concert. Certainly impressed by our children and, of course, the work that our music department led with them. 2 wonderful displays of talent. Tonight we're going to have the opportunity to recognize some Geography B winners, which will be exciting, and some recognition that is certainly due for the wonderful knowledge those students have. And then we'll be inviting other children in down the road to recognize like Spelling Bee and other wonderful accomplishments. The last thing before we invite our students up, I just want to be kind of on record foreshadowing our next meeting, which is a week from tonight, in this very room. We are going to certainly continue our dialogue in and around budget. So a lot of the conversation that you're going to hear tonight is going to mature into our formal budget presentations and start to inform our recommendations that the board and administration will have to wrestle with for the next couple months. And at the next meeting, we'll also talk about the district calendar for next year, which, just like the budget process, is going to prove to be complex and complicated. But I do want to share that we will recommend that children return before Labor Day. Starting school on Thursday, September 3rd would be the recommendation. So please mark your calendars and plan accordingly. So with that said, I think we'd like to turn our attention to our students in the audience. And Mr. Sotile, if you would like to do the honors, please. That would work.
So we were quite excited to host our annual, and it's now our 7th annual Geography Bee at the middle school just a couple of weeks ago, and students began preparing for that back prior to the holidays. They took a written exam in their classrooms. All students in the middle school had the opportunity to participate. And from that exam, which is a challenging one certainly, we were able to pull 10 finalists, as is our traditional approach to our school-wide bee. We had 10 finalists from all 3 grade levels, some of whom were returners from last year, some new faces. And I have to say, you know, the Geography Bee is very special to me as a former history and social studies teacher. It is definitely a challenging event, and one that really generates a great deal of enthusiasm in our school. So this year, we had, as I said, 10 finalists, but our 2 championship round contestants were actually students who had made it to the finals last year, one of whom was one of our 2 championship round contestants last year, and they really waged a battle right down to the end. We got deep into the you know, tie-breaking questions. It was really very, very exciting. So it gives me great pleasure really to acknowledge them tonight, and I'll start with our runner-up, 8th grader Inez Mendez. Inez. Last year, and really just did a great job. And then our champion for this year, 7th grader Zachary Rosman. I just have to say one additional word about Zachary, and actually this is something that will come up later tonight in our discussion. But Zachary is passionate about geography to the point that earlier this year, he actually put together a proposal, a written proposal, for a geography club at the middle school that ultimately became one of the club offerings that we have at our school, and has generated a nice following and is continuing to build that enthusiasm around what I think is a really important subject, and certainly one that he's passionate about. So congratulations, Zachary, as well on that.
So Inez and Zachary, why don't you come on up so you can be acknowledged by the board.
Are you Zachary? Hold on, I guess you get. Oh.
Congratulations. Very good. Well, congratulations, both of you. And we normally have a nice reception line with the board, and I apologize that it seems a little awkward with our table set up as it is tonight. But both of you were very proud, and congratulations.
It's a reception square.
A reception square. It is. It is. So I guess to move on.
Yeah. So actually, we did our GO the acknowledgements, and now we have to do our acceptance of our agenda. So can I have a motion to accept our agenda tonight?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And we really got your report already.
Yeah.
'Cause you kind of
I hijacked it tonight.
segued
Normally
into
I'm
that. That's
redirecting.
fine. So that
Yeah.
means we're straight into our exciting discussion.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of
Yeah.
back over to you to kind of kick that off, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. You know, when we think about the course of a Board of Education's business, they're charged with making a lot of important decisions. They sit on some committees throughout the school year. They glean a lot of knowledge from their experience as parents and community members. And we try to then fill in the gaps throughout the course of the year by sharing information, whether that's, you know, weekly news that I try to provide the board or the presentations that the administration delivers in this very room. But we started to feel that sometimes we don't have a true conversation. It becomes very one-sided, and we break down some of, I think, that authentic nature of the dialogue that could really benefit both administration and the board. And from my experience, I've seen many examples where school districts have been very successful in facilitating a traditional workshop environment. And oftentimes in a workshop, there isn't much of an agenda, if any, and the board really sits in a meeting dynamic and has conversation about important topics with their staff, and opportunities to help inform decisions, and most importantly, for it to become a learning experience. So tonight we're going to venture into something new. It's kind of exciting to see everybody around the table in what is going to be a dialogue. First portion of the meeting, we're going to invite our school-based leaders to talk about the work that they've been leading in the school, initiatives that we talked about that probably grew out of the budget discussions last year. And then from that, kind of transition through their experience, the work that they've done this year, and then roll into what they see their needs are for the following year. In doing so, you're going to hear their voice. You're not going to hear my voice or Raina's voice behind it, but you're going to be able to speak directly to them. We're going to kind of structure it in almost 4 mini little presentations where we'll go school by school with those respective leaders talking about their work and their needs. And then we'll try to have questions and discussion after each school has spoken, and then we'll move on to the next. But it's a new process for us, so I ask that everybody kind of be patient as we go through some growing pains with this. And, you know, certainly, you know, ground rules are always good, but I think the bottom line is just that we all give one another an ear. I think there's a good opportunity for the board and community to hear about the great work that you're doing in your schools and what you see as needs moving forward. But it's also another great experience for the whole administrative team to be able to hear and process the questions that are coming from the board, for us to have them as takeaways to inform our work. So I have to say, where, you know, it could be a little antsy about a new format, and geez, how's it going to go? But I have to tell you, like when the administrators, we had a meeting last week, I think I summed it up by saying I felt kind of excited about this because it was something new for us, and I think something that's going to be very positive and help inform how we have conversations in the future. So with all that said, I look to my left to Randy and Meg to talk about your work at Dow's Lane. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. You know, Meg and I are both very excited to be here and to be the first ones to speak in this new format and to be the guinea pigs for this. But thank you. But I think we're really happy to report that it's been a very exciting and very productive year so far at Dow's Lane, especially in thanks to the community and the board and Dr. Harrison and Dr. Kaur for supporting so many, you know, great initiatives. I think that the best way to sum it all up is that it really falls under the theme of supporting students, while supporting those students who may struggle a little bit more, and also supporting those students who are ready for deeper learning. So last year around this time, we were here in the same room, and we talked a little bit about the Foundations program, which was something that we were hoping that the board and community would support. And so Foundations, as you might recall, is a phonics and handwriting program which we have implemented in kindergarten and first grade. And while we're only halfway through the first year of that implementation, I think that it's pretty safe to say that it's been very successful so far. I think that we're seeing progress from students that we wouldn't have seen until much later in the year. And it's also providing us with a set of data that we weren't collecting in such a clear, articulate way as we have in the past, which then feeds into how we support students students who are beginning to slip or struggle a little bit, we're able to provide additional support to them right away. So that's one of the things that has been happening at Dow's Lane that we talked about last year, and we're happy to report on this year. Some of the other work that's been continuing is our work with outside consultants, and so Shelley Harwain, who's a consultant that's worked here in the district and has worked across the district now up into middle school, continue to work with Dow's Lane, but with a different focus this year, focusing really on inquiry-based learning, and she focused her work in second grade and third grade, and really worked alongside our teachers in classrooms with students so that our students could follow an inquiry-based model in social studies and science, which was a learning experience, I think, both for students and for teachers, but ultimately was a really enthusiasm generating endeavor. It got students and teachers really excited about learning, I think, in a way that they hadn't been before, and a level of investment.
Randy, can you just give an example of what inquiry-based learning would look like?
Sure. So I think that if I could look back at a lot of the learning that I did probably in elementary school and through high school, and maybe some of you as well, there was a lot of learning about facts, and when we were writing reports, we were reporting facts, and if I was writing the report, or if Allison was writing the report, or David was writing the report, it would look very much the same. And those of you who have had second graders go through our district in the past might remember a report on a bird. So students studied birds, and they would collect information about a particular bird, and then everyone's report followed a similar format of telling about the important things about birds, where they live, what they eat, how they raise their young, and those are typical types of categories that you'd see in any sort of nonfiction informational text, and our students would mimic that in their writing. What inquiry-based learning does is it really helps students to pose a question, to find out, to identify something that they want to learn about, and to follow that thread of inquiry as part of their research process, which really more accurately mirrors what we do as adults in real life. Regardless of our professions, we aren't often called upon to write nonfiction reports that follow a scripted format. Instead, we look to a particular area and find a question that we're interested in, and we follow that thread of inquiry and do investigations. So the second grade did it around in their social studies unit, which is about suburban, urban, and rural neighborhoods and communities. So in the past, what students were asked to do is really be able to provide a summary of each of those environments and some examples of those communities. And so this year, instead, they did a study of urban, suburban, and rural environments, and they all posed questions, and then they went about researching that. And so some of that was through text, some of it was internet-based, some of it was through interviews, and students got very invested in it because it was their question that was leading them through the study, and really took them, I think, to a deeper level of learning. One of the students became very intrigued when they were looking at photographs, became very intrigued with street vendors in New York City. And so she had a bunch of questions about street vendors. And so her father would have to go to the street vendor on the corner near his office every day with questions when he bought his coffee and get questions so that she could write this report. And like most research, sometimes we find the complete answer to our questions, and sometimes it just leads to more questions, which I think was a really nice lesson for kids to learn. And then in third grade, it centered around the Hudson River, so as part of their Hudson River study. So students really followed an area of interest to them. So some of them were very interested in the hog chokers, a fish that's in the Hudson River, and they went about asking those questions. Some of them became fascinated with the building of the new bridge, and so had to go and contact architects and things to learn more about that. So it really put the students more in the driver's seat, and I think increased their level of engagement and investment in the study. So that was some of the also part of the exciting work. And then along with that, we were continuing the curriculum alignment and mapping using our Rubicon Atlas, which is I think also something that came up in this room last year and we're well into using. Our math coach continues to support teachers and to provide enrichment in classrooms, supporting teachers and students that way. And this year we've also had a greater focus on data-driven instruction. So we've really been using some of the new technological tools that have been introduced in the district, including Google Docs, to collect data about our students as readers and as mathematicians, and to, as grade level teams, look at that data and see what it tells us about student learning and about instruction. And then we've also looked at, in addition to that more formative data, the data of how students are doing on formative math assessments or their reading levels, the foundations assessments. We also look at the standardized test assessments and to see what does that tell us about our programming. And we've engaged teachers across grade levels now in some of that work, because in the past a lot of that work was done at the grade level, looking at their data from the previous year and thinking about what they might do, and now we're really looking at it more programmatically so that our second grade teachers and soon our first grade teachers will also learn more about that and see how that might influence their work with students. Along those lines of some of the consultants and the curriculum development, there's been a lot of staff development at Dow's Lane. So as I mentioned before, foundations, we've also had a consultant working alongside our teachers on that. We've had Lisa Davis-Moralia working on us with Habits of Mind, who I think many of you may have come across here in the past at Irvington. We've also been working with Jody Hoffman, who's a behavior consultant, which I think was also part of a conversation back here in this room last year. And she's really been working with key staff members, but also the staff as a whole to establish positive behavioral expectations across the building. And then we've also been doing some of our in-house staff development where we've had study groups. We have a math study group that's run by our math coach, Christine Rosner, and they're looking at the math modules and habits of mind and how they can marry those two ideas. And we also have a foundations study group that comes together once a month to look at the foundations data across kindergarten and first grade. And then we also are continuing some of our smaller in-house staff development opportunities where we continue the Teaching Topic Thursdays and our Dow's U, which are Dow's Lane initiatives to give teachers a voice and an opportunity to share areas of expertise with the rest of the staff. And Meg?
Can you just explain Habits of Mind?
Well, actually, that's part of what,
Segue. Okay.
a nice segue for
And we
Meg.
can start with that too. Habits of mind, so in this room, we've had conversations around dispositions in 21st century skills. Habits of mind is a particular way of viewing these 21st century skills, and there's prescribed 16 dispositions. And it's a lot of dispositions, so with Lisa Davis's help, we've focused in on a couple of those dispositions. And we started the work last year with a core group of about 12 teachers. Some were classroom teachers, but we also wanted to get to the broadest amount of students possible. So using our PE teachers seemed to be a natural way to do that because they touch every child in the building. So we talk about these dispositions, these habits of mind that regardless of your walk of life, having these skills and being able to flex these muscles enable you to be successful no matter what walk of life you go to. And so for the students, we started to look at what was it, where were the areas where we felt they could access and still grow from. So we talked about being persistent, being a flexible thinker. These things go along naturally with problem solving. And when Randy mentioned that marrying of the work with the coach, with the math coach and the teachers, you need these things that when you're solving basic problems and certainly more complex problems throughout the day that are real world, but also the things that you'll encounter within your studies. So the teachers have been working first to develop lessons with Lisa Davis where they explain the habit of mind and the students try different things. One of the lessons, to give an example, it talks about managing your impulsivity. Because when a problem is presented, sometimes it's very quick to leap to a conclusion and jump in and think that you have the problem solved. But you need to manage your impulsivity and take a step back. See what other ways we can solve this. What other people or resources need to be part of the discussion. So in that lesson, she lays out, the teachers lay out 3 different objects, and they ask the students to self-identify which one is the hardest to resist or manage your impulsivity. And for students at our level, one of them is a present that's wrapped, another is a bag of candy that's unopened, and the third is a stuffed plush toy with on its hand says press here, and you know the minute you do that it's going to do something. And the students have to say which one is the most difficult for them to resist. And as they're discussing it, it's different for every person. One student was like, I know the present isn't for me, but I just want to see what's in it. It's the anticipation. And so at the end we talk about it, and we're not going to split up the candy, but we do agree that we will press the plush toy and see what it does. And then during that we move into a lesson where they have to manage their impulsivity. Now that they know what it is, how are we going to go about it? And then they come into a reflection circle at the end, and they talk about what was hard, what was surprisingly challenging. They know that certain things are going to be challenging, but there are certain surprises that come up too. So we had a lot of excitement around our first cohort last year, and it's expanded to a second cohort, so another group of 12 teachers. And again, we're picking up 2 special area teachers. Our art and our librarian are coming into the fold, and again, regardless of what homeroom you come from, you're going to be touched by those teachers. And I'm very excited, and this is actually something we'll talk about later on. We've already had buzz, and people are asking how they get into cohort 3. So we're very excited and planning ahead for that. Also, Randy was talking a lot about the data and the inquiry that teachers are doing around the data. And last year we talked about expanding our response to intervention, those academic supports for students, particularly in the area of math. So as we were looking at the data from the math modules last year and using the help of our coach, Christine Rosner, and with our 2 math RTI teachers, we were looking at what we needed. And one of the areas we started looking at was the early intervention. So for this year, for the first time, math intervention is being offered to kindergartners. So as they were becoming used to school and used to the language of mathematics instruction at Dow's Lane, we now are starting to identify what are some areas. And the math interventionist has been a part of this discussion and the instruction with them from the beginning of the year because she pushed into the classrooms. Now we're taking a look at how can we support those students with additional resources, and they're going to come out of the classroom and work with the math interventionist in her classroom in small groups, so that she can guide them, because we're noticing that as the concepts become more and more rigorous, some students are having some difficulty, and they need that extra reinforcement. So that's how we're using the additional support of the math interventionist this year. And then also, Randy mentioned the inquiry around our behavior support. Jody Hoffman was a specialist that we spoke about last year. Mr. Palermo talked about his work with her last year, and he helped connect us with Jody Hoffman this year. And at first, we were trying to find where did we need her and what was her expertise, and we were trying to uncover where these 2 areas met, and we looked at the data. She connected us with a referral system where we could see not just major incidents, but also minor ones too, where fine-tuning of behavioral support was needed. And we started to track where were these behaviors taking place, which areas of our school building were the most difficult to navigate. So then also working with our teaching assistant, we could help put some supports in place in those areas so that we were becoming more focused and mindful of where the supports were and not blindly trying to place him or her in a different area. We actually had some data to support it. And when we looked at the common areas, we started to engage the faculty in discussion about what's the language that you're using in that area? If I say, keep yourself to yourself or keep your hands at your side, that is somewhat inconsistent for a student. I want it to be specific and focused, and she's helping us with that. And also leading some trainings with our monitors as well as our aides, because they both oversee the students in the cafeteria and at recess.
Yeah, and I think that just to make the connection for the board with that work, that grew out of, you remember, it was a budgetary initiative last year, and it started off, we were calling it a crisis intervention support because of some of the needs that we were seeing. So this was that work that the board endorsed. And I think the example that both Randy and Meg highlighted, the work with Shelley Harwain, is one example of taking advantage of wonderful resources that we have in our community. Shelley is a grandchild that attends our schools. Three. And she's an author. She's a professional development expert. So she's invested in our schools. So you talk about reaching out, and the bang for the buck that we get from not paying Shelley a dime is exceptional. So when we think about all the layers of work that she comes in and works with our teachers, it's through a community connection and resource that has been serving us well.
So, looking forward, I think that we want to continue to foster the programs that we've been initiating at Dow's Lane, and increase the support for all of our teachers and, more importantly, all of our students. Last year we talked about beginning foundations and beginning that work at kindergarten and first grade, and I think that for next year we're looking to expand that into second grade, so that consistency of approach and language students can just build on as they continue through Dow's Lane. I think that another area where we're really hoping to build on is in this idea of inquiry and how excited students and teachers got around that. That's something that we'd like to continue, and I think also that also connects to technology and providing some STEM opportunities, at least for our third graders, if not for second and third graders, possibly through Project Lead the Way. And Meg talked a little bit about the work that we've been doing to expand our support for math and our RTI program in math, and the early intervention that we've started to provide now. And we'd really like to see that expand as well, and offer more support to more students. One of the things that we find as students get into second and third grade is that in second and third grade we're still, and Joyce may even speak to this a little bit when she speaks, but when students are in the upper grades, we're still working on filling in some of those gaps and building number sense for students. And if we can provide a tiered approach to intervention where we can continue to obviously address those gaps for students where they exist, but to be able to also provide more immediate support. So as we're receiving this student data and analyzing it in much more real time than we've ever done before, it's nice to be able to provide more short-term support for students so that they don't slip and so that they don't become someone who requires that in-depth, longer-term support. So that's an area where we would also like to expand for next year so that we can offer more students support as they're slipping and not only after they've slipped and fallen behind. Another area where...
Is this supposed to be a discussion, or can we ask questions? Or just
But we're
wait
going to
until
ask
the end?
questions at the end.
Okay, sorry.
At the end of each
I got you.
building discussion.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's nice to know that you have questions. One of the other areas that we have also identified as a need at Dow's Lane is some additional social emotional support for students. We've got 2 psychologists who are amazing in their work with students, and our teaching assistant has also stepped in to provide some of the support, but we'd like to be able to expand support for students who are not just receiving mandated services through an IEP, but who may just be going through some difficult transitions in their lives. And so that's also an area where we're looking to expand support for those students as well.
And I think I mentioned before we were looking to expand our habits of mind. And for me, I was part of the contingency from Irvington who saw the STEM presentation and went to the workshops. And for me, it was a natural connect between the habits of mind and that work where we're pushing students to go to the next level and to look at a problem in many different ways and to have to be able to articulate and collaborate. And habits of mind, we talk about communicating and thinking interdependently, that you're a member of a group or a team and that most closely mirrors the college and career readiness where you have to collaborate with other people in order to come up with the problem, looking at it from several different dimensions and different ways of and perspectives and points of view. Also, we're looking back to look forward to some extent where we're looking at our character education and lots of exciting discussions around things that we already had in place, the morning meeting, the essential questions, and how we are making that connect for our students with the habits of mind. Some of the things that we do in the building are Dow's Days, which helps connect the students to the outer world where they identify areas of need within the community. We used to do it in a week, and a lot of it was very adult-driven. Now the students are taking over, and we'd like to see that expand where the class identifies during a class meeting a charity that they would like to see helped, and they set a goal, they set a reward, and provide additional supports for outside of the Dow's Lane community into the larger community too.
And so actually, as Meg was suggesting, a lot of the work that's been happening while we've been listing them as separate initiatives, a lot of them really fit closely together. So whether it's we're talking about habits of mind and the STEM opportunities, or habits of mind and the behavioral work in RTI, a lot of them that fit nicely together. And I really didn't mention much about it, but we've also been continuing to develop the curriculum to further align it and clarify pieces of the curriculum as we've been undergoing the mapping. And I think that one other area where we're hoping to continue to work is in mapping the curriculum across the content areas and providing better vertical alignment from grade to grade, and embedding those habits of mind into units so that and some of the teachers have already started that work now where they've modified a math assessment so that at the end of the math assessment it also asks students, what was difficult about this? Where did you have to think flexibly on the assessment so that it's having them think about their thinking and really deepen it. And so those are the things that we're looking forward to doing in the future.
Thank you. Sure. So now we can take some questions and kind of discuss.
Well, I guess just it struck me just what you're talking about. Well, first of all, I think this is only a question if I'm completely wrong, and you'll tell me if I'm completely wrong. Otherwise, it's more of a comment from my fellow board members and our fine superintendent before we get into the budget process. But I've seen it with my own family and other kids who, every kid's different. Every kid can have issues arise in their education, K through 12. I understand that, but I've also seen that the earlier, when we're talking about the three things we're supposed to do, reading, writing, and arithmetic, the earlier that you address problems that children have, the less exacerbated that they get down the road, and I think they're easier to correct the earlier you address them. So assuming that everybody, or at least the educators, agree with me on that it seems to me that at least from a budget allocation process, that we're penny wise and pound foolish to not invest really into additional remedial measures at the early on grades. And I could just speak to seeing it with my own kids, how nipping certain issues in the bud, whether it's math issues or a lot of reading issues we've seen with kids that are younger. It just seems money very well spent to me.
How much of the, I know we're not talking like hard dollars here, but of the expanding foundations into second grade, expanding inquiry based opportunities, expanding support in the math, additional social, emotional support, not just IEP services, and expanding habits of mind. Are these additional people in some cases that we should be kind of thinking about and anticipating when the budget comes?
Sure. I think in some cases, definitely when we're talking about providing additional support and expanding services in math and social emotional support services, I think that we would be looking for people
Right.
in order to do that.
Because sometimes
and
it's
meet
just
those
like
needs.
a professional development thing or something, but in this case, these definitely require additional people to help reach more students.
Exactly, because it's really about creating more contact time with students. And other than, cloning the people that we already have, there's no other way to really create more available time than to expand the personnel in order to meet more students.
For Habits of Mind, though, the consultant is somebody that we already work with and have contracted with in the past. And also Foundations is somebody, again, it's an outside consultant. There are some materials, but.
Yeah, so I think that in terms of the budget implications, I think that obviously the personnel for an additional math support person at Dow's Lane, or an increase essentially. We currently share a math support person across the 2 elementary schools. So it's really adding to or supplementing the portion that we have, and the additional social emotional support. Like as Bob said, I think that investing in those areas early on, while certainly any of our students could struggle as readers, writers, mathematicians, or as people and learners at any point. I think that the earlier we can begin to address those needs, the easier they become to overcome, the easier they are to overcome.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. I'll try to be brief, but one of the things, I guess, in the last board meeting, Raina made a big presentation about STEM, and she talked about Project Lead the Way and integration into a variety, K-12 solutions. And one of the comments that John actually made, which I think really rang true to me at least, and to other people, was, we talk about STEM and we talk about this, but I think it always gets back to, if you want to make great engineers and great mathematicians, then you've got to have a really strong math department, and you've got to, if you make great kids who are great in math, then ultimately that will lead to great engineers and great mathematicians. And so when you're talking about all this, it seems like we didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about, with all the data we're doing, where in the curriculum can we improve? How can we improve the instruction that we're delivering? We're talking about adding people, but I mean, now that we have all this data, I'm sure there's ways to identify areas that we can improve with the resources we currently have. And how are we doing that? And are we doing that?
Sure. I think that Christine Rosner, who's now working as our math coach, part of her ongoing work is to analyze that data with us and with the teachers to look at what is it about the instruction that is making students successful in some areas and less successful in others, and what is it that we need to be doing as the teachers, but also is there something in the way that it's presented, something that as part of the math module that we should look at revising so that students can better access it. But I kind of want to go back to something that you said earlier, and I wasn't at the last board meeting, but I think that in order to have engineers and things, it is important to have a strong math program. But I think the more important than that is that we develop thinkers in our students. So even a student who may not be a math whiz in 3rd grade, but who is taught to think deeply and flexibly. And so I would partner along with having a strong math program, a strong social emotional supports for students, and the habits of mind or 21st century dispositions.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying we
communication
spent a
skills,
lot
all
of
of those
time
things.
talking about the other things and not a lot of time, which doesn't mean you're not doing it. I didn't hear a lot about basics and getting back to the basics and really focusing on developing strong foundational skills in reading and writing and grammar and math facts and things like that. I mean, and and even when you talk about adding math support, I mean, one of the questions I had asked as a board member is, you know, there's been a constant commentary since Christine's job did change about, I think we need to support all our kids, and have we looked at bringing, you know, if we're gonna bring someone in, can they also focus on helping the high flyers as well as the kids who are struggling? Because I really think, you know, it would behoove us to focus on all of our students, and I certainly heard from parents with younger kids that they feel like there's been a great loss to their kids without having Christine pulling kids out like she used to a couple of years ago. So is that something that we've thought about at all, or?
So one of the things that from Project Lead the Way that we saw, that I personally saw, they brought in students from the elementary school who had experienced the program over time, and that natural inquisitiveness that you see in children, and that was a targeted, cultivated thing in Project Lead the Way. And for the students who were interested in math and had some kind of affinity for math, they also could name it and connect it now to engineering. Children know the jobs that they see. They see their parents' jobs, they see our jobs, local community members. This opened up a whole nother world to them. This is another way to take math to another level, that they could become a certain job because it correlated with something that they had done in Project Lead the Way.
Right.
So those students who had that affinity for math, that was reaching them through this program. So that's something that we had our eye on after that as well, to reach those students.
Right, I mean, that's what the research with Project Lead the Way shows, but that's really high school research, because in the reading, it looked like the Project Lead the Way launch is fairly new. It looked like it was this year from what I was reading, and that some of the modules that they're developing are kind of ongoing. And then if we were to jump in with it like next year, we might be really in the beginning phases of it.
But the premise that it's built on, I think,
Yeah.
is what Meg is referring to.
Absolutely.
And the students
Absolutely.
I saw had been doing it for 2 years, and this was, I think, their second or third year in the program. And so they were able to speak to the habits of mind and really pushing to that next level.
Right, now, and, I mean, I think clearly, yeah. But let me ask you, kind of changing gears a second, you talk about the document, the inquiry-based learning. Isn't that the Common Core? Isn't that kind of the direction that the Common Core has taken a lot of the work that we do, kind of K-12, isn't it? More kind of factual-based, inquiry-based learning?
Exactly.
So we're just aligning with the Common Core when we're doing that? Or
Well,
are
I
we
would
taking
say
it
it's-
above and beyond?
I think it's aligning with the Common Core, but it's actually, I think it's giving more control over to students, so that students are leading the inquiry more.
So how do you see us, like Irvington, kind of going above and beyond? Like, you know, we talked about, we don't just want to meet the standards, we want to really create an environment for our kids where, you know, we're going to do something special for them and create these fabulous leaders in the future. So how do you kind of see us going above the basic?
I mean, I think that it's the coordination of all of these efforts, because we're not just teaching the Common Core math standards. We're not just teaching the Common Core ELA standards, but we're really trying to develop deeper thinkers among even our youngest children. So the infusion of the habits of mind into the Common Core math and into ELA, and the expansion of the inquiry-based learning outside of just the Common Core ELA standards and into other content areas. I think that that's really where we're providing opportunities for students that go above and beyond. And I think that what we're hoping to do in the future with the community support is to expand that even further. And as Meg was talking about with Project Lead the Way, it's a great opportunity to add something new to the students' experiences that help them to pull together skills and knowledge from different areas and to apply it in a real-world situation.
And how, I mean, I know we have this conversation, I know this goes to the article that Chris had asked us to read for homework, but, I mean, you talk a lot about measurements and data, but, I mean, I can tell you as a board member, I don't ever see any data. And we always ask this question, and like, how do we how are we sure, based on the data, that we're heading in the right direction?
Well, the staff meetings led and the collaboration with Christine Rosner, we take a look at the data from last year even and where the team was on that module, what was the date that they gave the assessment, how did the students do on the assessment, and we look at the growth over time. So we're looking in the short term too, and you may not see it because we, a lot of, especially the younger grades, it's the hands-on learning, it's not paper and pencil and Scantron tests, so you don't see them sent home necessarily. But we compare the data in the short term and the long term.
Do we make changes during the year? Like, are we looking for
Absolutely.
instructional
I think
changes
that-
also?
And I think that that's also some of the great work that Christine leads our teachers in, is that even though we use the math modules, the Engage New York math modules, we're revising them on an ongoing basis, that based on teachers' experiences and the student data.
So that's where it's personalized to Irvington too, where it's about our students and what's the next level that we want to reach.
And I think that that also speaks a little bit to your concern about students who might be on the higher end of the curve. Students who have an aptitude and an affinity for math, and the idea of are we missing out by not having math enrichment? And I think that what we've been finding is that the math modules are pretty rigorous, and there aren't very many students who are completing everything in the allotted time, that it is challenging for students. And it's not to say that there aren't other opportunities, and I think that that's what we're looking to explore. What other types of opportunities, like Project Lead the Way, or whether it be math enrichment or ELA or other content areas, are out there that we could continue to explore beyond just next year.
Just want to make sure that we're not getting too bogged down in Dow's Lane, because we have 3 more buildings to go. So we're about done? Yep. Maria, you-
Yeah, just 2 quick things. Thank you for your little overview of the school. Going back to foundations, you mentioned that you felt the program is very successful. The one thing that struck me when foundations was pitched last year as an ask to the budget, it seemed like a program that would benefit all types of learners and students. Students who are struggling, as well as students who could be pushed and you could get more out of them. You said the program was very successful, and it gave you different kinds of data that you're using to support kids at an earlier point. But can you give me an example of what you're seeing, what foundations has brought to Dow's Lane K-1 that didn't exist before that our students are getting now?
Sure. Well, I think that there's a more cohesive and more tightly aligned instruction from classroom to classroom, where we have consistent approaches and consistent language happening from one classroom to another. It also, in the past, while our teachers had created or had crafted the scope and sequence for the year, they're now all following the same foundation scope and sequence, which is and aligned with the Common Core. It is a little bit more rigorous, I think, than what we may have done in the past. And so we have students who are on text earlier than we've seen in the past. So we've moved beyond just letter names and letter sounds, and we have kids who are reading at an earlier point in kindergarten than we had seen before. And it's also giving students a deeper understanding of phonics and what it is that they're doing when they're reading. So to walk into a first grade classroom and to hear them talking about digraphs and blends, and to know the rules of language, and for them to be able to talk, to look at an unfamiliar word and to break it apart and talk about its pieces like that, and to know words in a deeper way. I think that those are all, added benefits for kids, because even those kids who came into kindergarten as readers, they now understand what reading is and why they're able to do it.
And the carrier or the crossover to encoding, when they're actually using those rules to now write the words and they're writing and spell them correctly, much, I would say with a greater rate, more rapid rate. Also the handwriting. The handwriting is now consistent from room to room. So when the teachers are using the writing lines, they're all referring to them as the same writing lines, the formation of the letters. That also makes it easier for students who need that extra support through occupational therapy. It's consistent, and the occupational therapist is also familiar with this program. So I think that it's the consistency is really amazing.
Okay, great. I'm very happy to hear that. And then last year when we were talking about adding a TA for emotional support, I had questioned whether or not that was the right skill set or that was the, if that was enough for what the need was at the school at the time. So I just want to be clear, you see a need of an additional, full-time, half-time, I'm not asking you for specifics, but someone exactly in the same type of position, you just need more hours for more support. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think that what the teaching assistant and the work with the behavior consultants brought to us this year was, clearly valuable skill set, support from someone who's an expert in the field, and which is now also expanded into, not just those students who are struggling the most, but how can we create more consistent structures across the school that will support all students, as well as those students who need additional support. And I think that that's just one level of the work. We're seeing, I think, almost with every day, an increased need in the district. So whether it's people who are moving in to the community, or members of our community who, where students are going through difficult times and are in need of that support in school, because it impacts their learning. And so whether we're talking about supporting kids who are struggling with reading or struggling with math, sometimes reading and math is not the area where they have the greatest need. It's actually in that social emotional realm where they need the support so that they are ready and available for learning in reading and math. And that what they really need is that support so that they can access the learning.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Next
Mrs.
building.
Chapman.
I'll keep it brief.
And lighthearted.
I thought I was too.
I will keep it brief. No, I will surprise you all. First, I'm going to, mimic what Randy and Meg said, just thanking the board and Dr. Harrison and Dr. Court. I couldn't be happier. Love the middle school, but I'm so happy as principal at Main Street School. And I think we're off to a really good start this year. There were so many things that were in place. The school functions beautifully, and I think I've been able to come in and support a lot of the work that's been going on, and then just give a new lens and perspective for us to think about how things are going and where we want the school to go in the future. So it's been great. So some things related to past budget. So I'm going to reiterate what Randy and Meg shared. I think a lot of what I'm going to say builds on what they said. With the math coach, so Christine Rosner, it's not a person position, but she has been an amazing resource and an asset for me, for the teachers and for the students at Main Street School. She partners with the teachers to look at the math modules, to revise them, to also unpack the ones that they didn't get to last year. It was a lot in their first year. It's only their second year using the math modules. We forget because it was so intense, but this is only year 2, and having her support has been tremendous for the teachers. We also have teachers who were not here last year, who didn't participate in teaching the modules, so she's there as a resource. When she's able to, because she's balancing the 2 buildings, she does find a lot of time to spend time in classrooms partnering with teachers to take the unpacking of a module, to look at a lesson, and then to take it down to the level of the classroom with the students, and then they bring that back to share at a team meeting. So we have regular math team meetings that she co-facilitates, often facilitates either with the team leader or myself, where we do look at the performance data on mid-module and end-module assessments, again, keeping track of the data in Google Docs, and identifying the areas, exactly what you were saying, Robin, where what happened here. Like, we'll go down to the question level and make notes. We'll make adjustments to the assessments on wording and consider our practice as it relates to how kids are performing. on the assessment. And we also have rubrics that we've been modifying and looking at so that we can also send that information home to parents so that they can see what is my child being assessed on, what's the language, what's the rubric, and of course it's all, they're in the New York State module, so it's all aligned to the Common Core and connects to how they'll be assessed on the New York State assessments. She's partnered with me to do some work with the faculty meetings at the level of, one of the things with the modules is last year, the rollout, they're very, it's very structured and scripted, and here's what you have to do. And I think that was part of the growing pains for us, is that it felt very different than like our practice where Randy and Meg were talking about inquiry-based learning. I think when we talk about Readers and Writers Workshop and we look at the math modules, there are some conflicts in terms of structure. And so I think what Christine's working really hard at, along with me and the faculty, through our faculty meetings, is thinking about how do we make adjustments in a way that provides opportunities for students to embed the habits of mind, language, and to think about what they're thinking about, and also to include discussion, because there's a lot of research out there that supports, the more you discuss something, the deeper your learning is and your acquisition of material can be. So she's been amazing. So looking forward to that continuing. Added AIS math support, so we were able to get additional AIS math support, which actually shifted the way that we provide AIS support at Main Street School this year. It's more consistent, and it's a higher frequency for our students who are identified as receiving AIS support. I'm going to also talk about that a little bit later in terms of asking, things that I'm thinking about for next year. She is able to, currently our support, she also supports with the push-in model, is able to support students in the classroom, and then when necessary pulls out students for extra reinforcement. But there's an articulation and partnership with the teachers to the extent possible, knowing that we also share her, Nancy Wagner, we share her with Dow's Lane. Another item as a budget impact from last year is connected also to what Randy and Meg said, so the training for monitors, and I also say for aides, although, as part of my work with everybody in the building is trying to create this common language school-wide. So, Habits of Mind at Main Street School has been in place for, Raina worked at developing it with the teachers, and it's been built over time. Also, Lisa Davis was there as a consultant a few years ago and did a lot of work at Main Street School. And so the teachers have embedded it. There's morning meeting, but pieces need to be developed. And so those are areas like recess time, cafeteria, the hallways, time that the kids aren't with the teachers. We've found really that those are the areas where we need to work on developing the adults who supervise and who intervene, their level of knowledge and understanding of habits of mind so our language is consistent. And so I've been meeting regularly along with Yurick Guerrero, who's our school psychologist. We've partnered on a few meetings to present to them information about ways to not just problem solve using habits of mind language, actually explaining habits of mind, scenario-based work, and I also did some work around DASA and making sure that everybody is on board with the same sort of eyes and ears when we're working with kids in all the spaces in the school. So for safety and also just for our school culture. It's an amazing school culture. Anyone who's been at Main Street School, you walk in and you just feel like you're a part of something, and that takes hard work, and that takes everybody being involved. And I think the work with the monitors and the aides has really, expanded what we are able to do. So thank you for that. Moving to next year, things to come. Told you I'd be brief. Okay, so we're moving through. So similar to what Randy and Meg said, I think a big noticing for me is really trying to figure out the ways that we can expand opportunities for students at Main Street School. So they're in 4th and 5th grade, and you heard Randy and Meg talk about Dow's Days and students having an awareness and raising money and doing things for bigger causes, maybe local causes, bigger causes. Main Street, I think there's a lot of stuff that happens in the classrooms, and we have monthly assemblies where students related to our character education questions frame an assembly for other students in the school. And they're also connected to habits of mind. But there is like one little piece that could be added. It's not so little, but it's this like sort of making Irvington Main Street School not feel so insulated and finding ways for us to connect with kids, with our community, but local, but also surrounding and also global. And so that in mind, I'm hoping that we'll be able to fund additional clubs next year. This year, with the support of the PTSA, we were able to fund Destination Imagination, which was really received very positively, but it's just a step in terms of increasing what opportunities would exist at Main Street School. So we are looking to think what are the, based on, similar to what David said earlier about a student having an interest in geography club. We have kids with interests and passions, and I feel like we don't have a place that we can foster it right now or structure that exists to do that. And in order to do that, we need support with clubs. And right now we don't have the resources to do that, so we find the ways, whether through IEF or through PTSA, and I'll continue to do that. But I do think as a district, we should also look to say that it's something that we believe that should be part of what we put into our program for our kids. And along with that, I just jotted down like a student councilor, some way to start those leadership opportunities for our students. Our students are leaders in the classrooms. They're leaders when you go out to recess, but they still need they need adult intervention and adult support in sort of molding that leadership to make impact on their own community, but also the external community. So that would connect to service learning also. Another add-on would be, or increase, similar to what Randy and Meg said about support. So yes, we got additional AIS support this year, but I'm gonna say that in order to support the students in the way that would be best model or best practices, or a model that would feel like we were really able to be flexible in some ways in our support, we would need increased AIS support. So right now we have 1.5 ELA AIS support at Main Street School, and we have 0.8 or something math support. So there is a disparity between math and ELA support currently, and we feel it. I mean, we feel it in scheduling. We share someone with Dow's Lane. There's less time to articulate. Although we've made improvements this year with the increase in time, I still think that there are places for us to do better, and that would mean flexibility. So Randy and Meg spoke about RTI. At Main Street School, it's really, students are scheduled right now based on their AIS criteria, how they did on the state performance, and also input from their experience, from their past teachers and current teachers if they're struggling. But we have very little wiggle room in terms of like having kids go in and come out. Kids are in because they're identified and they need mandated for support. But there are kids who just pop up in a module and we're like, if that student really needs an extra time, well, let's see where they fit in. We want to make sure that we're doing it the best way possible. And I think, Bob, you said it, is that, we want to give kids the support where they really need it at the time when, if we intervene, we'll really be making a difference on their future, in terms of how they perform. Another increase, this is a new one. So along the lines of this idea of global, where we fit in terms of the experience that we give to kids. Our district theory of action, talks about the 21st century skills and dispositions that we want for our students and to be college and career ready, and then to go out into the workforce. And we've talked about habits of mind and those dispositions. We want our students to be mindful. So along those lines, I'm proposing that world language back in 5th grade. Because I'm just going to read something. So about global competency. So I just jotted this down. Global competency is the capacity and disposition to understand and act on issues of global significance. Examples of such issues are environmental sustainability, population growth, economic development, global conflict and cooperation, health and human development, and human rights. And so I feel like that's sort of, I know it feels big when you're talking about 4th and 5th graders, but we are really developing kids from kindergarten through 12th grade to enter, into the world. They're citizens of the world, and we have to acknowledge that and find the ways that we support that. And so world language, fluency, here's another thing. Fluency in another language offers the clearest path to competency in a new culture and portal to understanding a wider world. And so we don't have an opportunity for students before they enter 6th grade to have a lens into another culture and another perspective, and another sort of way, a way of comparison and a way of, of thinking about the world. And hopefully with the world language program, connecting to kids who also speak the language that they would be in, and we'd be looking at how we would develop those connections as part of a world language program. One more piece, because I feel like that's a new one on the table, so I thought I needed 3 quotes. The bilingual brain develops more densely, giving it an advantage in various abilities and skills. Other cognitive advantages include more complex vocabulary acquisition and stronger focus and attention. So I feel like there's a lot of research out there to support why START languages related to brain and how it applies to your own language acquisition in your own in your first language. But I feel like it goes beyond that for why I think world language would be a good fit for us right now. I think it's just moving us in the direction of thinking about global citizens. So that's it.
Okay.
Want to go first?
Well, I just want to
Yep, go for it.
talk about the language, and then I'll let someone else go. But on the language piece,
Yes.
And just a little bit of history, which most of you in the room probably know, but
Yes.
you may not, is when the board, way back when, was really strapped for money and needed to find ways to save, one of the reasons I think that 5th grade language was on the chopping block, and ultimately we lost it, wasn't because I don't think anyone felt that it wasn't necessary, it wasn't a fabulous thing to have, but I actually think it was how the curriculum was delivered at the time wasn't being effective.
Yeah, I agree, that's why we did it.
So, right, so I guess my challenge to you, and part and parcel with suggesting that, because I think I probably can't find one person in Irvington who wouldn't agree that that's a great thing to do, would be to maybe try to cement a little bit the direction that you would see the curriculum going, and you know, would you see it changing from where it was, and those kind of questions I think would be really helpful as we're kind of juggling numbers as we move forward. Because, again, as I said, I think everyone would support that. In fact, most people I know would even support taking it lower as well. It's a question of money, and in that specific area, it was also just, you know, curriculum.
So I just wrote that down. I don't think it's something to like share right now.
No,
Is that okay?
but I'm just saying, no, absolutely not. But in the
Perfect.
process of
Yes.
the, you know, the budget, I
Yes.
think that would be really helpful information to have.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Thanks.
okay, that was just one.
Great question. Bob?
That was a great question.
I'm trying.
It's a full moon.
Exactly, it must be.
No, but I completely agree with you, and frankly, you know, from a standpoint of, you know, the horse trade that always the budget comes down to, you know, it was because I think the 5th grade math, it was sort of a hybrid French, Spanish thing that was sort of done part-time, and I'm overly simplifying, I think, what was actually done at the time, but that's why it was on the chip, and it was clearly why it was on the chopping block, and I think that the public sentiment, I agree with Robin, is where it is, and it's just a question of, could we make it a meaningful program for the dollars we're gonna spend? But otherwise, I didn't have any questions.
Other than exactly what Robin and Bob said was going to be my only comment as well, but otherwise I have no other questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Joyce is getting off easily.
All right. I guess you just have
Robin,
to
anything
speak
else?
quickly.
Yep,
Okay.
I heard that you
I
had
have
more.
one more.
Yeah.
It's really minor though. You talked about the discrepancy between ELA and math, AIS, and I guess my question, and again, I know it's not the only thing to look at, but is that mirror the state scores, or is that just kind of we inherited this kind of support in the school?
Yes,
Okay.
to the latter.
Can you get us?
Could
I mean,
I-
I know it's there. I
could-
could probably find it too. But can just, if someone has access to the data for the state scores, as to, I just would like to see ELA versus math. I'm not even comparing it to just how we performed in
Yes.
ELA, how we performed in math. I won't even look at, you know, percentages. I don't even care if it's.
But you don't mean how we perform, you mean the number of students who are below the cut score for AIS support. Is that what you mean?
I get, no, but I mean, I'm, you know what, I guess I just, and I could probably pull this up. I guess I just want to see the data for a few years back in 4th and 5th grade for state scores. Because it is
in the
below the
last
cut, but we always
presentation,
talk
wasn't it?
about
Yeah.
how we continue to support even, you know, we don't look at the cut as where we support. We'd like to provide support
Yeah,
beyond that.
no, of course.
So I'm just curious to how we ended up with that. It's so interesting, I didn't know that. More,
It's the
so much
performance.
more in
It's the-
ELA versus.
I have that.
Yeah.
I'll send it.
Thanks for,
Yeah, so.
Yep.
Just data to help support
of course,
decisions is all.
of course.
I actually had one question that was kind of a follow-up to Robin's question of Randy and Meg, which Randy asked, or answered at the very end, which is about, you know, using a math coach that would be student-facing instead of teacher-facing. And I think, you know, because Christine Rosner's position prior to last year was student-facing.
Thanks.
And I think Randy sort of answered it well from my regard, which is that the new standards, which were different than the standards 2 years ago, are so rigorous that in fact having enrichment wouldn't necessarily be appropriate at this point, because, and I'm summarizing, apologies for that, because the standards are more rigorous, and we don't really have kids who are kind of exceeding those standards and therefore necessarily needing enrichment. I'm just wondering if the same thing is
So-
true in the Main Street school as well.
Yeah, so I actually didn't, because Randy said what he said, I didn't say what I was going to say about the support. You know, what we've noticed with the way that the lessons and the modules, the problem sets, they're scaffolded from more accessible to less accessible in terms of difficulty, I would say. And so there is a place for students who struggle to access it, and then there's a place for students who really thrive as mathematicians to be really engaged and thoughtful and actually struggle and even get frustrated at solving problems. So I haven't heard any feedback, and actually I've actually spoken to I've spoken to students, spoken to Christine Rosner, spoken to teachers, just to ask informally, you know, we haven't heard any buzz or anything about anyone feeling like not challenged in terms of the math right now.
Okay. That's similar to Randy's as
Yeah.
well.
And I think, if I can just add something, I think that the area, if we're going to talk about enriching the experience in math for students, I think that it goes to that idea of more authentic
Yes.
opportunities. So whether it somewhat relates to the article, the homework, as Robin said, about really authentic performance tasks for kids, so that they're applying the content that they've learned through the math modules in real-world problem-solving scenarios, not just on paper. I think that's really an area where
I agree.
It's more of a general comment. Again, it's something that we talked about in the board meeting last week, but I would like to share that also. And again, I don't think we as a board even officially all agreed, but when Raina had talked about, you know, specifically technology, and it's clearly, there's things coming in over time. And I know, unfortunately, we haven't really laid out a long-term plan yet for the district as a board, but that's not to say we can't look at the budget from a more longer term. So I know it's something that we kind of briefly talked about at the board meeting last week was, you know, don't be afraid if you have these, you know, these wants or these thoughts about where you want to be as a school, and you know, it doesn't have to be a year-to-year thing. I mean, if there's someplace that you think makes sense where you want to be, and we can figure out a way to kind of adopt a longer range, a long-term approach to budgeting to get there, I would say keep an open mind to that. Because it's really hard to budget year to year, and I don't think it's efficient or effective. And it's much easier if we know we want to get here, and then to work through that over a series of years.
So middle school.
So,
So we're going to see whether you're efficient, whether you have quotes to share. Research.
Sure he has a good story.
I can always make a quote up and, you know,
Yeah.
so we can sell
I'm sure you have a story.
Actually, we have I think, a very similar theme in some ways as Dow's and Main Street, certainly continuing on some of those themes. Allison's going to start talking a little bit about ways in which we're looking to expand student opportunities in the current year.
Thank you, and thank you to the board and Dr. Harrison and Dr. Kaur for letting us all share what's been going on this year. I'm obviously the newest member of the administrative team, so in the very short time, 6 months I've been here, I've been really impressed and excited, particularly learning about all the opportunities that we do have in place for this year, several of which came, as David has shared with me, out of last year's budget. So thank you up front. So what we wanted to do tonight was sort of our unifying theme at IMS, is talk about all those different opportunities that we have for students both in and outside of the classroom that, again, support students' academic as well as their social, emotional learning as they grow and develop across these middle school years. And so one of the value systems that we have at IMS is the importance that we place upon rich and engaging activities for students in both in and outside of the classrooms. And when we think about outside of the classroom, one of the first things I noticed coming to IMS are all the structures and the systems that are in place to allow for children to be exposed to a variety of different extracurricular activities. One of which came directly out of the budget from last year was the restoration of the intramural program, which has now been a nice sort of link between the intramural program at Main Street School and high school, now that that's been restored at IMS. And I think that two things that are really unique about the intramural program is that when we think about that in comparison to the modified sports program, is that the intramural activities are open to all 3 grade levels, while the modified sports are targeted more for 7th and 8th graders. Another unique facet, I think, of the intramurals is that students can participate in them all year long, whereas when they're on a modified sports team, it might just be part of the year. So again, in terms of, and it's not just athletics, it's also leadership and other social skills that they're developing as part of that. So that's been one area that, again, is a direct result from last year's budget, so thank you. Another structure that's in place at IMS to support students' development outside of the classroom are the various clubs. And we've had several new clubs, which we heard about this evening, that came directly from student interest, and that's really an important, I think when we think about 21st century skills, is giving students, you know, voice and choice, and tying in the inquiry that Meg and Randy were describing at Dow's, and that students, based on their interest this year, have submitted proposals. For example, that we saw tonight with Zachary winning his award, the Geography Club is one example of that. Another club that was restored from the past, it had been dormant for a few years, which is the Spanish Club. And when we think about the Spanish Club, we think about students developing leadership skills as well as academic skills. And then another club that's not currently funded, but we're going to make a plea for it for next year, is the Debate Club. And again, that came out of student interest, and we're very fortunate. One of our new 8th grade teachers is actually, she's the advisor for that club, and they're meeting during lunch. So that is a club, and when we think about the Common Core and the push for students engaging in verbal as well as written argument, that club speaks volumes about the kind of work and the kind of clubs I think we want moving forward. So clubs are definitely, you know, a big success at IMS, and again, they're open to all grade levels, and they meet in a variety of different ways, so they're really accessible and allow for participation based on students, you know, other activities that they have outside of school. And then when we think about just the enrichment or the expansive opportunities that have happened for students in the classroom this year, one example is from the budget from last year, and that is the increase to staffing in our music program, specifically our band program. And really the outcome of that has benefited all of our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade band students. And what that means is those students are all receiving more frequent and more consistent targeted instruction, which is supporting their development as musicians and as performers. So we hope to continue that because we've really seen sort of the results in their success. So again, that's just a sprinkling of some of the initiatives that have come right out of last year that are really supporting the whole child. And our part 2 of our presentation that David's going to speak to is how our adult learning this year in the building has also impacted and provided for more enriching opportunities within the classroom.
Awesome. So, you know, one of the things that we've said for a long time at the middle school is that it really is all connected. And we work very, very hard to ensure that things don't happen in isolation and that there is truly integration between the various efforts that we make. Allison talked about some of the new club activities or the restored club activities. But one of the things that I would say about those, for instance, is that they're connected to an overriding theme, and that theme is that we want a wide range of meaningful experiences for students in their classrooms, outside of their classrooms, and then we want to do the work behind the scenes to bring those about, right, and to make sure that trend of continuing to increase the meaning of those experiences continues. So our clubs that Allison mentioned, they provide students with a range of experiences from academic to service-oriented to social to providing leadership opportunities. We want that same type of thing to happen in the classroom as well. And so in order to bring that about, we need to be focused on integrating our adult learning experiences in a way that allows them to then transfer, them meaning our staff, to transfer their learning and their expertise and their growth into the way in which they instruct students, into the way in which they collaborate with one another, and into the way in which their own practice continues to grow. And so that happens in a lot of ways. One of the ways that certainly is tied to previous budgets is the implementation, as mentioned at some of our other schools, of the Rubicon software, where teachers are working hard to map their curriculum and then to use the curriculum that as they've mapped it to revise and improve experiences for students, both in the way in which they plan their lessons, in the way in which they look at their units, in the way in which they think about the big ideas that they're trying to connect between units and across disciplines. As we've looked at the Common Core standards and as we've now lived with them for a few years and are continuing to find ways to align ourselves to them, again, that theory and that theme of alignment and integration becomes ever more important. One of the things that's true with the middle school is that, as you all know, I know I've seen all of you at our parent evenings, is that this is the first experience for students where they've got to continue to study in all of these disciplines, but study with very different people in different classrooms and in ways that can certainly lend themselves to be done or feel like they're being done in isolation. So the theme of our adult learning is not that social studies is the same as ELA or that math is the same as science, because they're not. The content is very different. But the thinking that goes into being successful in those areas is consistent. We want teachers to be able to be explicit about that. So how do we do that? Well, one of the ways in which we've done that regularly is through the use of our grade level time that gets scheduled into our day. Our teachers are routinely engaged in professional learning activities during that time on a grade level basis. Each grade level selects a focus for their work, and while each of them is slightly different, they all have a common theme. Again, this idea of integration where we're looking at the instruction that we are providing to students, we're sharing that instruction with colleagues, we're receiving feedback from colleagues, and we're looking at ways in which the dispositions that we've named in our theory of action are either being taught or in ways in which they can be taught more effectively. Again, math is different than science, but being a flexible thinker has common threads in each of those subject areas, for instance. So that's an example. So it's not uncommon. You could walk into the middle school on a day where we've got a grade level learning time scheduled, and you could see a science teacher sitting with all of the teachers in his or her grade level, sharing some work that they did in class with kids, sharing some student work product, saying, so here's what we've got, here's what I think happened here, but here's what I really was hoping to achieve, or here's where I'd like to go as my next level of work. Can you share some feedback with me relative to this work that we're all doing together? That connectedness is incredibly important, and the results of that connectedness are that you can walk into classrooms and you can see common frames for questioning, for instance. You can see common approaches to the ways in which we want kids to discuss. The idea of the Common Core, for instance, asks students in the literacy standards to be evidence-based. Well, that doesn't only exist in ELA, although they're commonly quoted as the ELA Common Core standards. But as we presented to the board last year, they exist in science and in social studies. So how do we make sure that what kids are doing in ELA doesn't stop and then sound or look completely different when they go to science or social studies? Well, one of the ways that we do that is through our joint professional learning endeavors. That continues on into our faculty meetings and has really become an entrenched and ongoing part of our work with teachers. And that then feeds back into improving and assuring the quality of the curriculum that they're mapping and revising as we go forward. Beyond that, though, and certainly things that will have a budgetary impact or in some cases have already, certainly the Google Apps for Education is a good example of a place where our teachers are working quite diligently to try to find ways in which to engage students through the use of technology in ways that wouldn't be possible without technology. For those who might not be as familiar with Google Apps, one of the things that it has increased to a great extent is the level of collaboration that's possible for kids and the speed and frequency with which students can receive feedback from their teachers and engage with their teachers. We have a number of teachers who engaged right now in a Google Classroom pilot. It's a more interactive, web-based way in which they can share course content and course documents and engage students in discussion beyond the classroom. And it's something that teachers are using their professional learning time to increase their level of skill in order to provide, a broader and richer experience for students. Along the theme of integration, and although it didn't have a budgetary impact last year, one change at the middle school is the way in which we've approached our technology program and study skills program at the 6th grade level. We are, for the first time in a number of years, fortunate to have a teacher who is teaching both 6th grade study skills and 6th grade technology and is a full member of the 6th grade team. While that teacher's new to our district, having the ability to work with each and every 6th grader at least one time, if not more, over the course of the school year, and be a part of that 6th grade team where he meets regularly with them, is enabling us to get more of a coherent experience in the 6th grade for students as they go through the various programs we have in place for transition, and as they consider ways in which technology can actually be a tool in their learning. I'll give you a quick example of what that looks like, and a very small example, but one I think that is meaningful given where the history might have been. Recently there are students in the 6th grade were working on a presentation in their technology class, and so you might say, well, how does that relate to technology? Well, part of it related to technology is since we wanted students to become more skilled at using presentation software in technology, but it wasn't just about the software. There was a link created between topics that were particularly relevant to 6th grade learners that had experienced nearly a first year of middle school, that have been going through this transition where they had to move from class to class, they had to be more organized, they had to do all the things that kind of linked together with the 6th grade experience. So in so doing, what happened was this course, where it is a technology course, took on a task where we were trying to build more effective communicators and students, both listening and speaking and presenting. We wanted students to become more skilled at using a piece of software, which students had a choice of a number of different pieces of software to use for that presentation. And we wanted them to be able to articulate the experiences that they had had thus far in 6th grade on a range of different areas, and reflect upon what they had learned through them, and to share their experiences with their peers in a way that allowed them to demonstrate their own growth and their own learning. So there's dispositions that were touched on there. There's content learning, and there's integration, which is something that we're seeking, because we don't want kids to go from a self-contained elementary classroom into a world where things happen in isolation across content areas. So one small example. So those are examples of what's happening right now, and what I'd say is that the work that's been done this year, partially through the use of Chromebooks that were granted to the district from the IEF, partially through the implementation of Google Apps for Education, has certainly increased the appetite of our teachers for more opportunities to do that. By rolling out the wireless network on the campus, we've been able to utilize those Chromebooks across our classrooms, and teachers are avidly seeking ways in which they can use that technology to, again, build on collaboration in their classrooms, get students to be able to do things via the Google Suite that they weren't able to do previously, or that was very cumbersome to do previously. And so one of the things as we look forward to next year that we're hoping to increase is the level of technology that's available to our teachers via devices such as Chromebooks, which are portable, which can be used to create a one-to-one environment, or if not, in some cases, not a one-to-one, but a 2 or 3 to 1 environment, and increase that level of collaboration and communication that suite and those tools can provide. Along the lines of technology, I too, like Meg, was able to be a part of the PLTW conference, and it really opened my eyes. It was not a particular program that I'd had a lot of experience with prior to my visit there. And one of the things that was striking to me was what we want our technology program to be, and then observing middle school students that were a part of the Gateway program presenting in ways that really represented some things that I would like to see our students be able to do and have the opportunity to do, and I know that they could do as well, or if not better, from the basis of not just, again, technology being about a program or a piece of hardware, but technology being about thinking. Because no matter what technology we engage students with in school today, it's certain that by the time they leave our schools, that technology will be antiquated. Right? That piece of hardware or software will be antiquated. But it's the thinking that they develop. It's the practice that they have in working through unfamiliar situations and connecting the dots between their content knowledge and their prior experiences and the unknowns to come to answers, or maybe raise new questions, as we talked about earlier, that can really provide rich and meaningful learning experiences. So certainly PLTW is something that we're interested in exploring at the middle school as we look at our 7th and 8th grade technology programs. You know, I also talked about our club program, you know, and I just can't say it enough. The club program at the middle school is one that we're proud of, but we're always looking to expand upon. And I would say that, you know, 6 years ago when I became the principal of the middle school, we had a club budget that was some $15,000 higher than it is today. And so whether that was the right number or this is the right number, or I guess is an argument for another time, another place. But what I'd say is that as long as we've got students who are innovative in their thinking and who are looking to be passionate about the opportunities, and as long as they fit into these different ideas of service, leadership, social emotional growth, academics, as long as they're looking to push the envelope, we owe it to them to support them and to really be as passionate as they are about providing those opportunities. So I, you know, I do look to the board for support in further expanding our club opportunities as we continue to look to support our students in their endeavors. The debate club is certainly one example that came because of student interest, and I'm thankful for the teacher that's running it on an as possible basis right now, but I certainly would look to expand upon that, you know, based on student interest. But also there are other areas that I would look to pursue as well as we go forward. You know, finally, and I say this knowing that it was a proposal last year that was unable to find its way into our final budget. But I would be remiss if I didn't say it. You know, one of the things that our collaboration as a staff reminds us always is that there are at times holes in the program that we do provide currently. And you know, one of those holes exists in our integrated co-taught model in one of our content areas in each grade level. I am of the belief that a strong ICT model where we have a special education teacher co-teaching with our content area teachers is a benefit to all students. And in our 7th and 8th grade, we presently offer an ICT model in our science classes. In our 6th grade, we don't presently offer a co-taught model in our social studies class. And that's a support for students that I strongly recommend that we reconsider as a district, and I would like to see included in the budget. It's clear that when we talk about the ways in which we support our students who are in need of support, that is a hole that you know, we find ways to fill with the resources that we have available at our disposal at this point, but one that we could better fill if we were to fully complete and fully build out our co-taught model. But it's also clear that by doing so, we would support all learners in those classes, whether they be classified students or not. A smaller student-to-teacher ratio allows for greater differentiation, allows for more innovative grouping, and allows us to really take advantage of the expertise of all of our faculty members that are put in place in those classes. So I do advocate for the increase of 1.0 in the special education department for the purpose of increasing our ICT model. You know, across the board, I think what I would want to say, you know, Joyce said I would have a story, and Rena or Dr. Harrison said I would have a quote. So I do have one quote, and I'll quote Walter Moran, whom probably none of you know here, but is someone very important to me. He said, and I think he stole this from somebody else, so you know, I'll let him take the fall for that. Very few people look back on middle school and say, you know, those were the best days of my life. And that may be true, all right. But I think, you know, in Irvington Middle School, we work very, very hard each and every year to try to change that, or at least try to make that different for our kids. And so whether we talk about the classroom experiences and improving them, whether we talk about the way in which we want all members of our school community to be learners, whether it's the searching for new opportunities to augment what are already some pretty rich ones, that's at the heart of our goal. So I humbly submit that to you.
That was very quick of you to come up with something, David. So high marks.
Maria, do you want to start us off this time?
Sure. It is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, we have ICT models 6th, 7th, and 8th in English and in math, correct?
And one other subject, depending on the grade level, yes.
One other subject depending on the, so in sixth grade, it's social studies,
Sixth grade science.
it's science, and then,
Yeah.
flip it, and then seventh and eighth, it's social studies. Because this doesn't exist really, I mean, we have ICT models, K-5, you know, one classroom or two, depending on the grade. At the high school level, I believe it's ELA, one grade, it's a subject depending on the grade. So my question to you is what are you seeing that you feel that that you need more intervention?
So, you know, regardless of the grade level, here's what we find. We find that the content of one of the courses is one that is in need of remediation at a much starker level in some of our other support classes than the ones that are supported through the ICT model, for instance. So let me explain what I mean by that. So in our BSP, our Building Support Program, which is not a special ed support, but a support that's certainly accessed by many of our classified students. It is a class where teachers both preview and review material, work with students on organizational skills and so forth, and really try to support the content of the mainstream courses. What we find is that our BSP teachers have to spend an inordinate amount of time, say in seventh grade, on science, because students who are struggling learners or who need the additional reinforcement are not getting the same level of support in science that they are in, say, social studies or math or ELA, where they're in a classroom with two teachers, where they're able to get the benefit of that lower student-to-teacher ratio, where they've got two teachers delivering that instruction in a way that looks different than it's able to look in science. Similar would be true in social studies in the sixth grade. And as a result, what you've got is you've got a lot of this, while they support all content areas, you've got a lot of science instruction, say in like seventh grade, coming from a teacher who is not a science teacher per se, but is trying to kind of fill in for students what they might not have been fully able to grasp the first time around, rather than reinforcing what they might have been working with the students on in a co-taught model, or that they have broken down in a way that can be accessed by all learners in the main content class.
I'll follow up on that, actually, because we did talk a lot about the ICT model, and my recollection that the decision ultimately was made that we weren't going to add another one, not purely because of, we didn't hear it or it was a judgment call, but I think it had to do with there's been over the years some feeling that the model itself is not as efficient as it can be, and that a lot of people who go through the ICT model and come out of it feel that, it's only sporadically that it really supports the kids to the degree that it could. So I think the comment that at least I know I made, and I think other people supported it, was, if you can look at the model and you can figure out a way to make it better, so that most of the kids who come out of it in most of the classes feel like it benefited them, then clearly expanding it makes sense. But if we have a model that so many people come out of and don't feel that it was really as good as it could be or as efficient use of our funds, then why would we expand it? So I guess I would throw that back and say, always open to hearing how we're going to make things better and how we could improve the program, and then, perhaps expand it. But if we're keeping the same program, and again, every year it's a discussion and it might come out in a different place, but it would be disappointing to think that we can't make improvements in that program given, how so many parents feel about it after going through it. And I know many of us have heard these comments. And I think that was kind of the nature of the discussions last year. So, that I would say.
So the ask is that
The ask
to sort of think of, much like your request of Joyce and the curriculum around
Well, the ask
world
is-
languages, to think about the program itself and.
Yes, and a little bit different here, because in world language we don't have something, so we're almost starting from scratch. But here we have something, and year in, year out, it seems to be pretty consistent for the past few years that I've been in terms of how it's delivered, the model, and how they work with the students. And I know many, many parents who have met with different people in administration about how, it's not really helping their kids to the degree that it could. And to me, I view it as, are we efficiently utilizing the resources of the district to the degree that we could? So the ask would be, can we take a harder look at the program and maybe figure out ways to improve it, especially if we want to expand it? That would be my ask.
I just need to say something to follow up what you're saying. Respectfully, I have to say I completely disagree with what you just said about referring to the ICT model. I think you might be mucking up some other issues that came up during the budget process last year. But I don't think that was necessarily what the issue was about the ICT model itself. I thought it was more of the need, and it was a give and take in terms of budgetary money. That was my
and then it was my personal maybe. I mean, because again, I feel like there have been many, many parents over the years that have talked to different people in administration about their kind of frustrations and ways that we can make it better and ways that we can improve the model. And maybe it's just me, and that's fine. That's why we have a board of 5. But it just seems like in theory, on paper, it could be such a great program, and there's always ways to improve all of our programs. And it really would like to figure out a way to improve the program instead of it just expanding it when I know that there's been, quite a lot of kind of complaints about how it netted out on their child after they got through middle school. The net effect, was it helpful? Was it very helpful? Was it not helpful at all?
I think, you definitely made your point.
Okay, no, I was just wondering, so that's me. And the other thing is, it's actually interesting that you brought that up, because I will, and again, this is, just mutterings that I'm hearing now, but and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I recently had a conversation and hearing that there's one ICT class is really lagging the rest of the grade in terms of where they are curricular-wise. So when I hear that, and then it's concerning. I mean, just if you're asking to expand the model, and I'm having a conversation with someone who's saying, not all the classes are moving ahead at the same pace, then that's a problem to me in terms of how the model's working. So,
again, I don't know that I could certainly. First of all, I've not been made aware of a concern relative to that. But beyond that, I think more importantly, to say that it's a class that has slowed down for any number of reasons is due to the model of instruction is at least somewhat speculative.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. And then I guess another question I had was the issue of wanting to bring in technology, and I guess and I get back to the same theme that I've said the whole time, which is my concern with technology is I think it should be a tool for enhancing instruction. And I think it's a great thing that we can bring things in and test them and see if they're working. And then, if it's not, move on to something else. And so I feel like of some of the things we've talked about, it would be great if we could see some instances of how that has improved instruction. Not just necessarily changed it, but actually the net effect on the child is they're performing better, or they're learning more, there's more data. I get back to data again. I would like to see some data on how some of the technology that we brought in this year has, or even last year, has positively influenced or positively resulted in better scores or whatever. Some of it's subjective, some of it's going to be quantitative.
Well, you know that Dr. Harrison shared some data with us by email. Did you just want to make sure you got the email today?
Not sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
He sent us an email today with some survey results from the students.
Oh, the survey results.
Exactly. So I think it's appropriate for us to talk about that, in the context of that, so that would kind of be a bigger discussion.
Yep.
Okay.
Those are my two, the technology and the ICT.
Bob, anything? Nope. Okay, I think we can move on.
All right, high school.
Thank you, everyone. And again, like my colleagues, I want to start off by thanking Dr. Harrison and Dr. Core and the board for creating this very unique opportunity to really share. I'm hearing some very common themes that I think resonate for us at the high school also. Right off the bat, supporting students and meeting their needs at all levels and in many ways. Certainly a focus on STEM and our ability to support student learning around those initiatives are things that you're going to hear about from us as well. We've kind of started off by thinking about three major topics of things that are going on this year. I kind of grouped them into, one is around curriculum, another is around instruction, and the third is around counseling and guidance and support in multiple manners for our students. So let me start off and talk about curriculum. I know for me, when I think about curriculum, I think of a very broad process. I don't just think about individual courses that we have, but I really think about how they sequence together. And I know at the high school, that's becoming a theme of our discussion and really starting to look not only within departments, but collectively as a faculty around the purpose of the courses that we offer, how we can create sequencing opportunities for our students over time so that they're building their skills and ultimately that we're making them more ready for college and their post-secondary experiences. So I remember standing in front of you actually rather than sitting with you last year, and one of the big things that we pushed for was a new writing curriculum at the high school. So I want to start with that. We've had a chance to implement a 9th grade writing curriculum, and our initial feedback is that it's had some really strong and powerful impacts for our current 9th grade students. In speaking with teachers and speaking with students, some of the initial things that I want to share is that the course is focused on the writing process and how to make students successful, not just in their English classes, but really across the board as writers. The curriculum is aligned to the Common Core Learning Standards in writing. There's been a focus on the narrative component and essay writing component to start. Which is great because that targets the college essay process. So as 9th graders, they're already building skill sets that are going to serve them well 4 years from now when they're ready to apply to colleges. Certainly in keeping in line with the Common Core, there's segments on informational writing, research component, and argumentative writing. But I think more so than just the topics of the type of writing is the broader experiences that our students are being able to have in this writing course. So I know one of the pieces that they're going to be getting involved in the second half of the year is very much of an interdisciplinary model where our writing teachers are going to be working closely with our science and social studies teachers in 9th grade and be able to allow students to bring in pieces of writing from other classes to be able to then look deeper at their writing process and their skills to enhance what goes on. Again, not just in the singular focus as I think has been the past, not in Irvington, but in general in high school, to look exclusively at English classes, to really look at writing as a more global piece. In general, or maybe more specifically, the course this year is also focused on providing students not only in their core writing skills, but the process of looking themselves as writers. So the idea of how does a writer plan for the process? Where do they find resources? How do they seek peer review? How do they implement feedback? And I think that's a really key piece and one that can't be overlooked. And then finally, which is I think a theme for us at the high school, is how can students self-assess their own learning and really grow from that process? So as I started with, we've been really focused on writing as a process rather than writing as an outcome. In addition, I think this 9th grade writing course has allowed us to create a continuity. I know that the district has been very focused on the AWE folders and the work that students do over time as well as their cumulative narrative. Well, our 9th grade now writing program gives us an entry point into the high school to carry that work forward in a very specific and consistent way. I know that Deb and I both have heard feedback from really excited teachers and students. Teachers have come to us to show writing samples of students over time and how they've evolved, not just a single writing sample. And then the ability to follow up with those students and to hear their excitement about how their process has grown has been pretty overwhelming. And we've seen it at all levels. So while we've seen it with some struggling learners, we've also been able to hear from teachers and students of some of our most gifted that have come and talk about the experience that they're now having and the ability to look at their writing from a very new and unique perspective. So overall, I really think that the program has had a successful year one. Certainly, we expect to grow and look deeper at the curriculum. But very specifically, I think our students are being able to have, are now able to have a broader view of their writing in the high school process. Another major area certainly is technology, and I'm certainly hearing from my colleagues at all the levels this year. And by that, I think of it in multiple ways. You know, we have Project Lead the Way already in place at the high school. We had the great pleasure of attending a conference this year and hearing more. And there's so much opportunity. And where to find those entry points is important, but I think more importantly is for us to really look at what we have right now. So in Project Lead the Way, we offer an intro to engineering. I know that I've heard from many students and parents to think about if there's opportunities for more. In addition to that, though, I think technology, and Robin, I think you said it before, it's not just about courses, but it's also about how it infuses throughout different classrooms. So the work with Google and that process, the idea of a BYOD model on campus. You know, I often hear about how technology can bring down the learning process, whether it creates a distraction for students and opportunities to be away from instruction. But I always like to look for the opportunity in things. And where can this technology be used as a learning tool in the classroom rather than just merely look at it as a way for it to be a distraction. So while a BYOD model certainly can create some challenges, I also know that it can create some great opportunities and excitement, especially when teachers can rally around it and see a vision for their students. And the work with Chromebooks. We started it last year. We see it play out more this year. As I go into classrooms and I see teachers becoming more and more comfortable with how to use technology to expand the learning process, it's very exciting to me. And I'm seeing students using technology to advance their thinking and to really demonstrate it in the classroom. But it goes beyond just that as well. I think it's about opportunities and initiatives beyond even just classroom instruction. So I know we recently sent out an email about a morning app writing program that we're about to start. It's going to be a pretty unique and new experience at the high school. We're excited for it. And again, I think it speaks to this whole notion of tapping into the students and their interests and the ability to use technology to advance their thinking and their learning. And then quite frankly, and I thank Dr. Harrison for his work around the Innovation Fund. We just had about a dozen submissions from students, and some of the ideas that we've received are quite extraordinary and opportunities for learning at multiple levels. I heard David speak so much about club opportunities and the importance of that at the middle school. I can tell you that we have students at the high school that are leaders in their thinking and not just around their own personal experiences of learning, but how it can push down to multiple levels. And in STEM initiatives, and getting more girls involved in engineering. So often when we create these opportunities for our students themselves to create that leadership, it's amazing the opportunities that it can lead to. And one of the other things that I want to speak about with curriculum is really being able to touch all of our students. And when I talk about course sequences, it's in such a way that we make sure that we can address all the needs of all of our students. What I mean by that is we have some incredibly brilliant students in Irvington. We want to make sure our curriculum can support them in what their post-secondary plans are. And then we have some students that are struggling to find their way. And it's not necessarily because they're struggling learners. It may be because the way we put our curriculum together isn't necessarily inspiring them. So this year we started a new program called our Bridges program. And it's targeted some of our seniors that have experienced some struggles along the way. And we're giving them new and unique ways to experience a thirst for learning and to really create a mix and a transition between what they can do in their senior year and what their post-secondary plans are. And Deb and I had an opportunity recently to sit on a panel of our students in the Bridges program, make presentations around their focal points for the second half of the year, and it brought us to tears. Some students that have really exhibited some difficulty in the past on multiple levels, just flooring us with how well thought out their plans were. And that was everything from budget considerations to learning, to time management, areas that many of these students have often struggled. So it's within these opportunities and focal points this year that I do believe that our curriculum is truly growing. The next piece that I wanted to talk about was advancing instruction. Similar to my colleagues, I think we've had a great focus on Common Core learning standards and how that impacts us. I think I've already talked about how it's being addressed certainly in writing in the 9th grade, but it's not just in a singular course. It's across the board. But I think it goes beyond just looking at standards. We've been incredibly dedicated as a campus in working with our department chairs around professional development and making a transition over the last few years of looking at them as instructional leaders rather than more as administrative leaders of departments. And that's been a huge shift and one that we're very committed to, and we're spending a lot of time with them. And they're doing extraordinary work, whether it's their own versions of instructional rounds or whether it's really trying to push their thinking around the types of things that are going on in classrooms. But I'm really proud of the work of our department chairs. We also, last year, hosted a Tri-States visit for world language, and I know this year we've been working again as a campus to put a lot of focus on our world language program and how we can use feedback from the Tri-States model to really look at the way we deliver instruction. And it's important work. I know that we're currently going to be working with a consultant to dig deeper into that, and I think it creates some tremendous opportunities of how we're delivering instruction in world language. Another thing that we're very focused in at the high school is the opportunity to create time for professional development. It's very difficult in a high school. Often you get caught up in your daily schedule, and I know at all the other levels in our district, there's been process and segments carved out, whether it's grade-based time, etc. High schools often find that challenge, so we've been working very hard to implement some new structures this year and to be able to find time to work with each of our departments separately and our faculty as a whole to really start looking at what we do in the classroom in different ways. And then finally, again, similar to my colleagues, to talk about curriculum mapping. I think it's really important. It's not just about how we look at curriculum, but it's how we look at instruction. And I think one of the focal points for the high school has been assessment and learner outcomes and the types of experiences that we can give our students and hopefully give them an opportunity to use content to demonstrate their learning rather than to look at the content as the learning itself. Another really amazing area of excitement that we've had this year is our work around supporting students, our guidance program, and our support services. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Deb.
So thank you, everybody. I guess you saved the best for last. So I would just like to go back to Bridges for one moment in just a pure self-serving moment of pride, but I would like to thank the PTSA because not only was it the board's support in accepting that this could be a seed program that could have great opportunity, but it was the PTSA that gave us the money to do it. And actually 3 of our Bridges students will be presenting at the executive board. So another wonderful opportunity for these 3 students, a leadership opportunity that I don't think in their wildest dreams they ever thought that they would be asked to present at an executive board meeting. So I can't say enough about this program. I would be lying if I said it has not already planted seeds for what it could do for our full senior mentorship program and just the ways we can increase the rigor around that. So our commitment for what this program has done. And if I could just say that David Green is one of the leaders of the WISE program. He's one of the consultants of the grant that are working with us. And he sat on our presentation panel and he left our room and said, I am going back to the masses because what is happening in Irvington is a model for what WISE programs could be across the county, and that we've tapped into something new here that they've never seen before. And it was just such a prideful moment, so thank you for that.
Has the PTSA agreed to fund it again next year?
Luckily,
I say that half facetiously.
they've paid a lot on the upfront.
It's one less thing I have to trade Robin Kerner on, so it's
They've
good.
paid a lot of the upfront, and luckily, the Wise Consultancy Group is a not-for-profit. So
Great.
what they're asking for to continue is
It's
a
cost,
much
yeah.
less, a very minimal cost to continue that consultancy.
Great.
So I get the great pleasure of speaking about guidance, and it's something that Dave and I have great passion for. We stood before you last year and we presented a number of times about what our vision was for guidance, and how we could move our guidance program to be what Irvington sees it to be. And what I could say is, you know, the word that comes to mind is intense. It's been intense professional development from within and also from looking out. And I can speak of that in twofold. So I'll speak from out. So a lot of times in order to grow within, you need to look outside and you need to see what's going on in other places. So not only have we brought in a consultant that's been working with our guidance counselors as well as Dave and I as a team, is to really look at opportunities for where we can identify systems and where we can identify where this team and building capacity from within and really coaching each of us to name the outcomes that we're looking for. And that may seem simple, but it's one of the most valuable pieces of moving a program forward. And that's having someone to work with the people from within to actually name what it is that they want to do. And if you can name it, you can build it. And if you name it and build it, you can assess for it. So part of that consultant's work is really trying to get through the layers of what that really is. Also looking out, we have our guidance counselors participating in what I would call critical friend groups that are going out to other guidance programs in Westchester, spending half days and full days with our guidance colleagues from across our county to just kind of sit in and kind of suck on the marrow of what's going on in some other districts, both to recognize what we do and also to recognize what are some new types of components of our program that we might want to bring to Irvington. So it's really it's almost like we're anthropologists and we're digging away at other sites, trying to find out what we would want to bring back to us.
Deb, can you say which districts?
So I can speak to the most recent, which was Edgemont. So they came back excited. Anything from something simple, like the shirts that the guidance counselors were wearing and had a logo for their guidance counselors, and it had, you know, I think it said, it was really focusing on the word counselors, to just some of the other real intensive programs and how they may approach a college night. Another area that we're working with them is also to go out to more college visits. And we know that these are things that we investigate across our region, focusing first in the Northeast. This is something that we need to align ourselves to what's being offered. So it's just really looking and creating inroads with a long-term plan, because this takes commitment from our counselors to be able to step away sometimes from family for even a weekend visit, to kind of see what's going on in these colleges and create those relationships, to really see what's out there, what's new and exciting in colleges that we haven't tapped into yet. So on the looking out, and also our wonderful addition of Ms. Coleman, who is our new department chair, brings an energy and an expertise that I think if you spent time with us at the Jacques Steinberg presentation, thanks to the Rivertown parent group, that you could see and hear her knowledge for what college process and what college coaching is really all about. So I think from within, we also are now tapping into, she's bringing an outside perspective to us and building the capacity from within. I want to also speak to within the commitment as an administrative team. And we are meeting with not only Emily as the leader, the department chair, weekly, but Emily has also instituted a process where she meets as a counseling group daily. They've actually volunteered their lunches, and they sit together on almost every day. We know that things come up, but to sit together at lunch to process what's going on in their counseling department, as well as also meeting weekly for formal, twice weekly, 5th period, for formal protocols around the work that Dave and I are doing with Emily in our visioning coaching meetings. She's taking that back to her department and really trying to develop and name the outcomes. We just had one day of our 3-day retreat. Weather unfortunately interrupted some of that. But I have to say that the energy and the excitement from within the counseling department to name what doesn't exist. And the model of continue, revise, and create is where we want to go. So looking at what we want to continue, what already exists, revise and make better. So when we think about new formats to junior and senior college nights, and the amazing feedback through our PAC committee that we've received on how small changes, just as simple as asking for feedback or preparing questions ahead of time, really went a long way, and really entering into a dialogue with parents, rather than just giving information, changing formats to panels, offering opportunities for people to really have their questions answered, has seemed to personalize that college approach. But it's also bringing the word counselor to the forefront. College is, yes, absolutely, it's a passion, it's extremely important. We want our students to conceptualize and realize what their hopes and dreams are for post-secondary life, but it's also about the counseling piece, and that our students have real needs. And where we can do early intervention at the elementary level, we can sometimes never predict what the onset of adolescence and puberty and brain science brings to the needs of our students at the high school level. We want our students to realize their own personal excellence. And with that, we can't remove the need, the human need, for them to have opportunities to apply the habits of mind, to learn what it means to be self-reliant, but to still have that support because they're still kids. So I think finding that balance, bringing the college process to the forefront, but not forgetting that they're absolutely counselors, and we have students with real needs that we want to continue to support. So with that, I'll turn it back to Dave.
So, it leads to some of the next part of the dialogue, which is what are the next steps for the high school? In sort of keeping with our original themes, the first place I go again is curriculum. And this whole notion of our curriculum feeds college readiness. So, start a little bit with PLTW and we'll come back to it. It's time at the high school for us to start expanding our PLTW program. We offer one course in engineering. The way PLTW has created their model is it's actually a 4-year sequence. So there's great opportunity for us to build upon that and look at that, either through the opportunity to offer 1 or 2 new engineering courses next year. That obviously comes with the need for training of staff, etc. This year we're running in computer programming 1 and 2 course, and we're excited to have that filter into an AP computer programming course next year. And in some ways that's one end of our continuum. One of the themes that you've heard, I think, in many of our schools, but certainly in hearing from Deb and myself tonight, is that we have a core of students that need more than just what our current curriculum offers. And one of the things that we haven't been able to offer in our district in recent years is the unique students that maybe need a different pathway, and sometimes that might be an opportunity for occupational education. So I know that that's one level of consideration that we're looking a little deeper at as well. In addition to that, the next step is our work around instruction. As we talk about college readiness, we really talk about a lot of what is. I know that we, as a district, sat in a technology summit within the last few months, and one of the videos that we saw showcased the fact that the students that sit in our classes right now will be working in jobs that don't even exist yet. So the idea isn't so much to prepare them for specific jobs, but it's more so to to prepare them for the opportunity to grow and learn into what those jobs are going to be. And I think more so than ever before, the need to look at teaching and learning, especially at the high school level, in a different model is really critical and important. And the idea of these thinking skills and these transference skills are becoming more central and more important than ever before when we're talking about college and career readiness. So it's tough work, but we're excited to do it with our teachers. And the same way it may be a little bit of a shift in a mental model for us here in this room, it's also a shift in thinking, quite honestly, for high school teachers across the board, not merely at Irvington High School. So it's work that Deb and I are passionate about, and it's work that we're doing on a daily and regular basis, and we're excited to keep doing it. I used a sort of a phrase before, and it's the notion of being hands-on and using content to expand learning. rather than to focus on the content as the learning itself. So there's another real need. I think part of what we've been doing at the high school in the last year and a half, at the same time that we're trying to look for areas of growth, it's also been a time of assessment. And one of those areas of assessment, and this is going to be kind of a shift in focus, is around the infrastructure and the infrastructural needs that we have at the high school. And I'm really going to start in an area of just clerical support. One of the things that we did this year was to put out a survey to other high schools in Southern Westchester. And it was, quite frankly, it was jarring for us to find out that the average number of clerical support in most high schools throughout the region is 5 to 7 members. At the high school, we have 3. And one of the things that we have been struggling with in the last year and a half is to really get a sense of how to best support the infrastructural needs at the high school. And ultimately, that means the ability to best support our students, because it trickles down in so many ways. So when we found out that most neighboring schools have at least 5 to 7 clerical support staff, it really started to put a focus and a showcase for us on the fact that we have 3 and also what that's leading to. So one of the obvious areas is we've had grade and reporting issues at the high school. It's been going on for years. Quite honestly, I remember my very first day on the job here in Irvington, and it was at the forefront. We were dealing with a grade and reporting issue. And sure enough, this year we opened the year with another grade and reporting issue, and this one revolved around transcripts. Fortunately, we were able to put great focus and attention to taking care of the issue and being beyond it. But my concerns are strong, and it's not just about having the infrastructure to deal with the grading and reporting system. It's how it pulls and tugs on us in so many other ways. So when we only have 3 clerical support people, it means that our guidance counselors are now used in ways that guidance counselors in other schools and districts aren't used. It means that the assistant principal and the principal are used in ways that, quite frankly, the assistant principal and the principal in other neighboring districts aren't used. I'm happy to put my attention to making sure that our transcripts and our report cards are accurate and are sound. But quite frankly, I also know that my time can be better used, and my ability to work directly with teachers around instruction, and for Deb to be able to do that is probably the greater long-term goal in making sure that we're spending time behind the scenes to make sure that our grade and reporting systems are sound and accurate. And again, I don't want to minimize that in any way, shape, or form. So we have some work to do. One is to bring to you this need, but the other is to then make sure that we're going to have professional development, that we're going to look closely at exactly the roles and functions of our current clerical staff, and figuring out if there are better ways to align that work and to figure out how we can get better around all these great needs. So there's a lot of ways that we can do it, but I think it's important for me to highlight for you first and foremost that when I bring up the numbers, it's alarming and it's very real. So I bring that to you, and I offer that up as something that certainly we're going to talk about in future weeks. But I'm confident that through some real work, not just around numbers, but also around how we work with our clerical staff and then how we make these transitions, that the high school is going to see some real strength and some real improvement in this area. So there's a similar theme around supports and needs, and it also goes to areas of students with support issues. I've heard some of my colleagues, again, bring that up as a district-wide initiative, but certainly at the high school, also something that we're dealing with. So with that, again, turning over to my partner, Deb, to talk a little bit about that area.
So I know that Dave mentioned that the use of really developing our department chairs as instructional leaders, we've identified a greater, I don't want to call it a hole, but really a miss when we don't have a special ed department chair at the table with us. So one of the things that I know we will be asking for in this budget and ask for great consideration for is the opportunity for us to include a department chair for special education. And what would that mean for us? So when we sit at a table, for example, we have every Wednesday, 8th period, we have freed up all of our department chairs to have a common period. And Dave and I, and every other week is with the middle school administrators as well, and every other week is just for high school. And we talk about instruction and instructional rounds. And we talk about collecting evidence and enhancing engagement, enhancing the work of dispositions, the coaching. And there's no special ed department chair sitting at the table. So some people might say, okay, well, there's content within every special ed department. But what it does is it loses that link between the supports that our special education providers give on a daily basis in each and every content. And it loses, for me and for Dave, this opportunity to say, how are we developing the instructional design opportunities and strategies that our special education teachers have the expertise around, that our gen education teachers could be using on a daily basis? When we talk about differentiating instruction, when we're talking about helping our students, whether they're in an ICT model or not in an ICT model, how do we bridge that gap and create a network so that we're not just working in departments, but we're really creating opportunities for each content area to see themselves within special education, and for special education to see themselves within every content. And you do that by creating dialogue. So to have someone at the table that could represent a department and bring back that work. There are also times when we talk about initiatives and we roll that out to our department meetings where we don't have a high school department chair that can roll that work out and really be that next step in our greater plan for how do you roll out the work at a high school level. Time is of essence, and department chair time and department meeting time and that opportunity for that one person to be there as part of the conversation would be invaluable for us to move forward as a high school. That also highlights a need that we've recognized with special education staffing. When I first came to Irvington, one of the things that I noted right away was that special education provides for students here in Irvington is provided with a commitment that we build our programs around what students need. And we all know the unfortunate ramifications of budget is sometimes we can't always give exactly what we want, but we find ways in which to provide students the things that they need. We've identified at the high school that we have real gaps. We have students that have the extra support, whether it's through an ICT model or 2 opportunities for resource in 9th grade, and then they get to 10th grade, and they don't have an opportunity for ICT, let's say in English 10, and they also don't have the opportunity for, let's say, a double resource or 2 academic supports that they may have had in 9th grade. Now, some people might say, well, 9th grade absolutely is where we need it. This is a transition year. We want to make sure that we're building the strongest transition from middle school into high school, so that these kids, when they come to us, don't feel like the rug has been pulled out from under them when the rigor of the content has to be there. But what we find is that students are losing some supports that they really need. And it's not for the sake of not naming it, but we find that if we want students to really build to those upper level classes, if we want our students that are classified, we want them in our honors classes, we want them in our AP classes. There is absolutely no reason that if we're not giving them their accommodations and we're not leveling the playing field for them, that we shouldn't see them in these courses just like everybody else. But with that needs to come a commitment. We've also made a commitment that we believe that having grade level specific academic support and resource room teachers is absolutely the model that we want to support. When you stretch an academic or resource room special education teacher across grade levels, you are asking them to be expertise not only in multiple contents, but multiple contents across grades. And when a student comes to their room and they create a Google Doc that houses all the 9th grade teachers' work, and they take that off of Edline and they present it on a Google Doc, and then you have a 10th grader, an 11th grader, a 12th grader sitting in there, they lose the opportunity to really individualize the work that an academic support and resource room classroom needs to be. And there's work to do, but we can't enhance that and really start to unpack what that is without the appropriate staffing. So I know that this is a huge request, but I also know that our numbers, and we can provide that for you as projections get closer, to really identify where those gaps may be. We also recognize that with moving with a department chair, that we also need to support support where that department chair would be moving out of a classroom position. And lastly, I can't speak enough or highly enough to this mental health support that we need to offer to our students at the high school. I have witnessed firsthand in a very short time here in Irvington an increase in the number of students that are exhibiting stress-related coping struggles when this knows no boundary. These are not just students who struggle in learning. These are students in every class, at every level, with every combination of things that we can provide for them. And they're struggling. And we use Miss Whitney, our
Student Assistance
sorry,
Council.
I was calling her community. Our student assistance counselor has become such an important part of our staffing in terms of our networking, but we also have a psychologist who has a caseload that would challenge any school psychologist. So when that school psychologist has 70 caseloads, 70 students on her caseload, we're begging and borrowing from everyone to provide those other types of supports that a school psychologist should have the opportunity to provide. So I think when we look at supporting students, and we even look at guidance as our hub, and we look at naming outcomes, and we look at really building a 9 through 12 comprehensive program, every layer of that has tentacles, and each one of those actually builds. And if you take one away, it lessens that structure that we're trying to create. So it's about everything, all the infrastructures, all the support networks. It's a lot to ask for, but our students at the high school really need it. And we're trying to create a more personalized high school, a high school that really sees students as whole students, not as content, and really trying to take that elementary, middle school model and really bring it to the high school to say, we're not just about content, we're about process, and we are still about the whole child. Because in the end, they're still children. And that's it.
That's it?
Very thorough. Thorough, passionate.
Well, that was great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So I think, first of all, questions. Bob?
I mentioned I needed to
Yep.
leave a little early to deal with business matter, but I wanted to wait until all the presentations were done. Thank you all. First of all, thank you for this new format. We should have been doing this for years. I thought it was very good. And thank you to all the administrators for very thoughtful presentations. I think it shows the thoughtfulness shows, I feel how much good work that you're doing on behalf of all of our kids. It was also good to hear all of the positive advancements that we made in a lot of areas this year as well. So thank you all. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And Bob has left the building. All right, if anybody else has a question and then leaves, we won't have a quorum anymore, so you
yeah,
guys
no,
can't
no.
leave. Yeah. Robin?
Yeah, a couple questions, just to clarifying questions that you mentioned. You mentioned two consultants actually that I was curious about, a world language consultant and a guidance consultant.
Okay.
Can you just talk a little bit about like how frequently they visit and what responsibilities they have, like what the goal is of having them there?
So the work with the world language consultant is something that we're actually just starting with. So one of the consultants that we work with is Black Culture Building. So that is actually, that consultant has done some work with both world language and with guidance. But the work around real curriculum and instruction in world language is a consultant that we're just starting a process with right now. So it's about to move forward from here.
Across all languages or?
It's going to be for the entire 6
For the
to
whole
12
department.
model. So it's both middle school and high school.
I mean, is that, just asking, is that something that potentially there could be some synergies with 5th grade if you guys are looking at rolling something out?
I mean, obviously, we're looking at a comprehensive model, so I would say initially the answer is yes. But as I mentioned, we're just starting that process, so
Okay.
before I'm ready to jump
Yeah,
in and say this is the right consultant to build forward with, let's make sure that the work is the work we want.
When you say focusing on culture, you mean culture within the department, presumably?
So culture within the department, yes, and being able to.
Not culture as world culture.
No.
Yeah.
Culture within.
Right, that's what I figured.
And then the guidance one is only the culture, or is there also?
Well, it's not just about culture. So, the consultant that we're working with has a lot of experience in high schools and in administration. So it's a lot around not just culture building, but also, I think Deb spoke a lot to the work that we're doing. So a lot of the work is how we can build consistency. Part of our goal is to make sure that we create a very personalized experience for our students, but one that also has widespread, that we're looking more comprehensively. So, we've made some strides this year. We made changes in our junior and senior college nights and what those experiences are like for students and parents. So there's a lot of ways that we're working with our guidance counselors, and some of it's just the consistency that Deb alluded to and really spoke of. And I think that's very new. So part of that's culture, and part of it's also really getting, rolling up the sleeves and getting to some of the work as well.
Are these, and now I'm just going more budget number related, are these things that you anticipate continuing through next year, or are they things that you think, okay, there's a very definitive beginning and an end, and?
No, I think that, it's an ongoing process, and, I think we're starting it now, and I know that the board made a commitment to us, certainly with guidance for professional development work, and, it's something that I think we want to carry forward with us.
Is it possible, it just seems like there's a lot of consultants now across K to 12. Is it possible as a board to get kind of a handle on consultants that we're looking at, just like where we're getting, the outside help? I know you mentioned Project Lead the Way and technology, and I guess you didn't specifically talk about adding to staff in that area, and I'm wondering if that's something that you're looking at for next year, or?
Right now, I don't think that there's an immediate need to add to staff. I know that the way we're currently constructed, there's opportunities for us to be able to maybe truncate some of our classes. For instance, in science, I know that we're running some classes at much smaller class size than have been the case in the last few years. So there could be ways for us to create staffing that way. And it's also could be about which courses we currently offer that may be similar to the Project Lead the Way model. So we do have architecture and engineering classes, but by tweaking the ones that we offer and realigning more towards a PLTW model, we might be able to create a better sequencing of students and create more opportunities for them to get college credit and go along the way that way. So certainly there's always an opportunity to expand our staff, but I don't know that I would want to start there. I think I would want to start by looking at the courses and the programs that we want and building into that. So,
No, makes sense. It's just that Raina had mentioned, I think she mentioned at a board meeting that we only have one teacher. I don't think it was at a board meeting, that she said there's only one teacher who's certified to do some of these computer kinds of, programming or technology classes.
No, we have several. It depends on what our approach is and where we're giving kids credit. So right now for the engineering and PLTW, yes, we just have the one teacher. But I also talked about Diana Cassidy and how Diana Cassidy offers our computer programming classes.
Okay.
So there's lots of different issues, and it depends on where we go and what teachers their certification is and where we're giving credit for our high school courses. So there's a lot of variation on that and how we can approach it, which is the good news.
Okay, so workable. I guess a general question about guidance, kind of, obviously it's been an area that we've all had a lot of interest in given the history, and I guess kind of taking a step back and looking at it maybe from a 2-year perspective, this year, next year. Is there one goal, if you could come up with one goal that you guys would have for that department at the end of next year?
one of the things, and Deb just talked about a retreat that we had, and one of the things that we're looking at is to really talk about what do we want our students to be able to leave the high school with. And by understanding the skill sets of what we want our students to leave with, it's now allowing our guidance counselors to work together to figure out a backwards design to building a 4-year model of how to get them to that point. So it's really about then aligning our practices to that. and, you know, I hate to go back to what I said before, but part of it then comes back to the infrastructure. So, you know, as we talk about an infrastructure that is short, one of the things I talked about is how our guidance counselors, how the assistant principal, how myself as principal, are being asked to do things that maybe we shouldn't always have to do. The other is about consistency. So when we talk about culture building, I think it's really important. I mean, it's no secret, we've had 5 department chairs in guidance in 6 years. So the ability to create consistency, for the ability for them to work together, and Deb spoke a lot about, you know, the daily meetings and the type of work that's going on, is no simple step. So the ability for them to really work together and to understand that, you know, we really want, if your child is working with counselor A and if Phil, your child is working with counselor B, we want those experiences to be very similar. So, you know, that's about really having our counselors work together to understand what their process is to build that consistency.
One last question. You talk about department chairs, and it really seems like you have moved the dial in terms of making a department chair more of an instructional leader kind of position. So, I mean, again, I guess I take a step back and I say, how do you guarantee that, like, how does it work? If you have instructional leaders that are working with the team or that aren't working with the team, how do you kind of work with that process? Because in the past, they haven't been instructional leaders. And if you want instructional leaders, how do you guarantee that you've got the right person for the job as a department chair?
So I think we've made tremendous growth. We've shown tremendous growth already in just 1 year. And our department chairs work directly also with a consultant that help them to identify those skills from within. I think that we brought on don't want to misquote, 3 new department chairs so this year that have a passion for instructional leadership. That is something, it's not that our other department chairs didn't, but I think everyone comes in their time in their career where they know it's time for a change, or they're seeing where the department chair position was going, and they knew that it was time for someone else to have an opportunity to take that position to its greatest heights. How do we know? It's through the daily work. I think it's progress over time, and it's trusting the process. I think instructional leaders need those opportunities, structured opportunities, to be instructional leaders. And that comes through protocols and times to be in classrooms, common release times, and also opportunities to work closely with Dave and I to really process through. And working with Allison and David as well for the middle school, because these are 6 through 12 instructional leaders. So it takes a collaborative approach, but I think I can speak in confidence that we've moved in that direction.
Is there any kind of review process or feedback process with the department chairs? I mean, as opposed to the teacher, you know, there's evaluations and there's observations. How does
Well, they are,
that
I mean,
work?
they're teachers, so it's part of that same process. But we also, you know, there's a coaching model where the 4 of us also work with, you know, a select group individually to help them along the way.
Okay.
Okay. Maria?
Just to clarify, you said there was 2, I'm sorry, the word is escaping me. Consultants, sorry. 2 consultants at the high school. One that worked with guidance and the world language department?
So one of our consultants has, again, broad high school experience, and a lot of the work that she's done at the high school, but quite frankly also on campus, is around a lot of these shifts that we've talked about, whether it's instructional focus, whether it's around leadership, whether it's around culture building. So it's really about
Goal setting.
goal setting. So, you know, it's really about the type of work that we feel we need to do with any specific group. You know, David brings up goal setting, which is really important work. So it's not so much about just finding someone whose expertise is purely in world language per se. You know, if we identify that one of the needs is to do work around goal setting, then that might be an initial entry point. But it's why I also mentioned that we're making a transition to a consultant who has a specific background in world language instruction.
So that's the second consultant?
Correct.
Got it, okay.
I think what you see is kind of an interesting theme, if I may interject now, is that you look at the work that's happening systemically. So tonight, we've really had the opportunity to highlight and the focus on the good work that's being led school by school or department by department and under the, the close watch of each of the building-based leaders. But there's a real systemic piece that's woven here, and I'd be really remiss if we didn't acknowledge that. And when we step back and we think about the work of the instructional leaders, for example, our conversation just recently here has focused on the 9-12, expanded to 6-12 piece, but realistically that's initiative that's K-12 and something that Raina has worked with and owned, and everybody around this table is a piece of that. But the leadership is coming from one direction here in the curriculum office to see the benefit of what's happening there. When we talk about the world language work that's happening there and the identification of our needs, to build upon the Tri-States report, the consultant that's being brought in is the expert I think Raina spoke of about a month ago at a meeting. So my point in stopping here isn't necessarily to stop and make sure we're tooting everybody's horns, but to draw attention to, I think we look at the conversation that's happening here. We're talking about an integrated focus. We're talking about a shared vision for leadership. We're talking about coordinated efforts that are happening across the board. So whether that's curriculum work, the improvement of instruction, program enhancement and enrichment, there's a real theme that I think is woven through all the dialogue tonight, and where there's specific work that's happening in schools that's very, very good work, and tremendous time, energy, creativity, and talent is informing that work. It's coming from, I think, a central point of leadership and a strong unity among this leadership team, and sharing a vision and identifying a pathway to enhance experience for our kids. And I don't know, to me, I just saw an opportunity to sitting back and being a part of that work on a daily basis. You can't help but not to see and watch go from one school to the next, and then kind of everything to kind of start weaving backwards again once you get to the high school. To me, was a takeaway that I had, that it was a proud moment, and I felt I needed to make sure we reinforce that for everybody.
Thank you. I would say my reflection on what we've heard tonight is kind of two things. One is slightly trepidatious thing, and the other is obviously great respect for the work that you've done and shared here. It's very impressive, and it does come across as being interconnected in a sort of in a system where the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. The trepidation is actually imagining the world of our teachers, and I think, Robin, you've even referenced this in the past, which is that teachers everywhere are, especially in New York State, are under a certain amount of stress because of the APPR, the challenge of having tests that are kind of performance on tests that students have not necessarily done well on, not here in Irvington, but just statewide. And then the APPR results where 98% of the teachers are rated effective or highly effective, or whatever those statistics are. So that is just kind of a mood issue for teachers. And then the practical impact of the enormous changes that Common Core requires, and then the work that you're all doing with them. It just, I wonder, if our teachers are highly stressed and how they're managing all of this, this additional workload, and what it really means for them. And since you, our principals, and Dr. Kaur are kind of closest to the teachers, I think it's just something for you to share with Dr. Harrison, so then he can share with the board. I mean, I don't think we want to get into a long discussion at 10:15 at night, but it's certainly just an observation listening that the stress on the teaching community everywhere, but even the work that you're doing here, I'm just curious as to how that actually happened. What is going on there? And again, it's a rhetorical question at 10:15 at night. But it is.
John.
What's that?
Thank you, John. John likes those rhetorical questions.
On that note.
And the other thing, how are we going to pay for everything?
Yes, that's true too.
We're trying to figure that out.
We're not there yet.
Trying to figure that out.
I think it's great to hear from you in very specific ways how your asks kind of, there are themes, and it's good for the board to hear it, you know, directly from you and hear it in context, the work that you've been doing, and the work that you'd like to do next year, and how it all fits together. So that's obviously extremely useful for us. I hope it's been good for you. Yeah, sorry John wasn't here, but I know John said he was going to watch, so if he,
Hi, John.
yeah, has his 3.5 hours. So I think we'll end our discussion tonight, and that means we are on to our consent agenda.
But if we can just speak
Yes.
specifically to the part two. So we obviously,
yes, part
we
two,
build this
right,
as a
yeah.
two-part conversation. And very clearly at 10:20 at night, I don't think we're
Yes.
going to be able to be productive. So what we would like to propose that we do is that we have another presentation that got bumped a while back to identify another work session that we're not going to have an agenda. Try to find a date in the next month or so and pick a day where we're going to come in and have that conversation along with the UBD discussion on one night, because it's all so related. But we're definitely committed to it, and we're doing it in this format because I think it was productive. And I'll wait for your feedback, but I think it was productive. But we'll pick another date, and we're going to do it because, you know, we've all done the work and we've all been prepared for that conversation. So
And it's a really interesting topic.
Yep.
But you can't start a new topic at 10:20 at night. So thank you very much.
And
We'll just go.
apologies to my colleagues for just committing you to another night.
Yeah. So our consent agenda, can I have a motion to accept our consent agenda, which includes items in 8.1, 9.1 through 9.8, and our business office matters 10.1. I have a motion to accept that?
So moved?
Second?
Thank you. Are there any items of discussion? Yes.
I had one quick thing. On
Yes.
9.6, the extra compensation for the half a sixth period class for math AIS. Are we increasing the AIS, or is that substituting for something that's already there? Like if someone out or something?
No, we're increasing the AIS.
We're increasing it.
Do you want to stay for a second, David? Yeah, I mean, I could answer, but you happen to be standing right there in the
2 weeks
Wait,
ago.
for the middle school.
That was in one of the updates like two,
Yeah.
3
Okay.
weeks ago.
Yeah, I know, but, and then when I said, but I just saw that sitting there and I couldn't remember, so. Okay.
David came, David left.
Thank you, David.
Night. Okay.
Okay, all right, all in favor?
Bye.
Aye. And that takes us through our consent agenda. Our next Board of Education meeting is February 10th, next Tuesday, at 7:30.
See you soon.
So that is that, and we are going to adjourn our meeting. Are we really adjourning to an executive session at this point?
10 minutes?
10 minutes, okay. We can have a motion to adjourn into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel history of particular persons.
So moved.
Second. Aye.